Hey everyone, welcome to Infinity Harry. If you're enjoying our unique takes on Harry Potter and want to see more exciting content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Today we will see what if Harry left magic behind and met the vampires. Here is short summary. After the war, Harry walks away from the wizarding world, only to find a new kind of magic in Forks, Washington, where fate introduces him to the mysterious Cullen family. But before we start, if you want more stuffs like this, then please support to subscribe this channel and share with your friends. Let's start the video. Harry Potter had gone back to Hogwarts to finish his 7th year with Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger, his two best friends, along with the survivors of their year. It was under the tutelage of Headmistress McGonagall that the three were able to graduate, though it was hardly of any matter to them at the time. The number of deaths was staggering, and it was only with the help of each other that they got through their pain. It was especially hard for Harry, as he had lost more loved ones than any of them combined. His parents, his godfather Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, Nymphadora Tonks, Fred Weasley, Albus Dumbledore, and Severus Snape, all gone. It was surprising that he hadn't sunk into depression, and yet, it wasn't. Harry was always a strong one. It was 2 weeks after graduation that he decided to pack up and leave his world behind for a normal life. Hermione and Ron, not to mention Mr. and Mrs. Weasley, didn't like it, but they understood. So with the permission from Andromeda Tonks, he didn't need it, but she was the grandmother, Harry collected his godson and was on his way across the world to America, where he'll be residing in Forks, Washington. He didn't know why, but something told him that Forks was the best place to be at this time. He just hopes that nothing exciting will ever happen. Heaven knows he had more than enough to last him 100 lifetimes. Now 2 weeks later, and life in the Potter household was anything but peaceful. A few days after their arrival, Teddy had contracted the flu, a Muggle illness. Harry had stayed up late at night seeing to the comfort of his charge. If he could have cured it, he would. But it was something that Harry had learned from Madame Pomfrey. You can't use magic to cure Muggle illnesses, as it would backlash, causing more damage than there should be. Fortunately, he had listened to Hermione and had gotten a flu shot when he told her of Teddy's illness. Unfortunately, that didn't stop him from being grumpy and tired. He groaned as a cry resonated from the walkie-talkie on the table. Teddy had woken up again. Blinking dazedly, a pair of gorgeous emerald green eyes was seen. He barely had time to properly wake when Teddy let loose another outraged cry. Grumbling, Harry made his way upstairs. His last words heard before he enclosed himself in the nursery were, "Somebody redeem Voldemort so he can kill me now." 3 weeks later, and the residents of Lion's Den were healthy and well. The weather was gloomy, as it always is in Forks, but that didn't stop Harry from spending the day outside with Teddy. The Lion's Den was located deep within the many forests of Forks. It was ideal for the wizard, as he needed secrecy to practice his magic and to fly his broom. Their humble abode was hardly that. It was a 2-story brick house, Victorian style. A winding path circled around a fountain in the front, a statue of a phoenix in the center. At night, it was a beautiful sight. The phoenix emits flames of gold and red, and the surrounding wall dances with the flames of golden hue. Engraved into the wall was an H for Hogwarts. Surrounding the lone letter was the symbols of its 4 houses: lion for Gryffindor, snake for Slytherin, badger for Hufflepuff, and a raven for Ravenclaw. The fox fountain was Harry's work. He wanted something to remind him of Hogwarts, of the only other home he had ever belonged to other than the Burrow. It's not like he doesn't have pictures of his days at the magic school, he has the late Colin Creevey to thank for that, but he wanted a solid foundation, so to speak. Besides, it would do for Teddy to know the houses of Hogwarts and its history, something he wasn't good at but was willing to leave that up to Hermione when he's of age. The Lion's Den was a beautiful home. Read. I am not that good with details, so I won't describe the house, so just bear with me. As mentioned, it was a 2-story house. But Harry had immediately added a 3rd floor for his magical purposes and charmed it invisible. Sure, their home was out of the way, but it doesn't hurt to be prepared. 2 days before school begins saw Harry and Teddy arriving at Forks High School. Yes, he had already graduated, but it would be hard getting a job in the Muggle world, should he choose to achieve one, with a diploma from Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. So he decided to attend the local Muggle school as a junior to learn only what he can and want, and to do something other than sit home with Teddy and get his certificate. He was sure that it would go off without a hitch, but the problem was getting a babysitter for Teddy. He didn't want to leave him alone with a stranger, as he barely know or trust anyone in this town, but he wasn't sure if he was allowed to take him to school with him. His house was off limits, so hiring a babysitter to stay with Teddy in familiar surroundings was out of the question. Carrying 4-month-old Teddy in his pack, he strolled across campus to the administration building. He took his time looking around, taking in the structure and the stature of the school. He didn't want any surprises while he's here in his new life. Merlin knows he wants to take a break from all and any surprises that has a mind of its own and springing up on him without a warning. He would have taken all day if he hadn't wanted to take Teddy to the beach he had heard about from the realtor who sold him the house. He walked in the building, garnering looks from the few staff that were there. He ignored them all and made his way to the counter indicating it was the registration section. He waited impatiently for the lady behind the counter to realize she had a possible student on her hands to look up and was on the end of his rope when she finally did. She was somewhere about mid to late 20s and was heavily caked up on makeup. She raised an eyebrow at him and her face contorted slightly at the sight of Teddy. "I'm here to register myself," he said, holding in his anger at the prejudiced look on her face. One thing he wanted to make sure of was that he never loses himself in front of Teddy. "Anger does nothing but bring pain," the lady said. "You need a parent with you, kid." "I don't need one, as I do not have one, ma'am. Besides, I became of legal age as of 2 months ago." If anything, her eyebrow rose higher. "You expect me to believe that? You look barely out of middle school, kid. Unless I see some identification with your birth date, you will need a guardian with you." Harry closed his eyes, meditating. It wouldn't do to release his anger among the Muggles. It would not end well. When he opened them again, the lady gasped. His eyes had turned a dark red, a sign of his magic. He willed himself to calm and his eyes slowly turned back to its emerald shade. The lady gulped and took a small step back. This boy was scarier than the 5 popular outcasts in the school. Harry took a deep breath and let it out slowly. He said so soft that the registrar had to strain her ears to hear him properly. "I don't want to do something rash, ma'am, so if you would be so kind, give me the proper forms to fill out and I'll be out of here in no time. I have no notion of staying longer than I want to, either." The registrar fumbled around for a bit. Oh, sure. Wait right here. I'll be back with the forms." Then she practically ran, somewhere. Harry didn't care where, as long as she comes back with the forms, he was fine. He sat down in a chair, setting Teddy on his lap. He bounced him lightly, eliciting giggles from the half-werewolf, half-metamorphogus. He nuzzled his cheek against the chubby little boy, both giggling at the feeling. "I bet you're looking forward to the beach, huh, cub?" "I know I am too. I never forgot that time when Aunt Myone took us and Uncle Ron to the beach. You were laughing at the sounds and made Aunt Myone cried. Remember that?" he whispered to his godson. Teddy cocked his head to the right, reminding Harry of Sirius. He laughed. He talked to Teddy for almost half an hour when the lady, a Miss Trent, returned. Harry stood up, shifting Teddy to his left side, and walked to the counter. "Okay, well, these are the forms you need to fill out. I'll take your identification card and make a copy while you do this," she said, still nervous around him. Harry gave her a small smile to alleviate her fear, but to no avail. He took the papers back with him to the chair and proceeded to fill out the forms rather awkwardly with Teddy in his arms. He was interrupted when a voice that reminded him oddly of Luna Lovegood but not quite broke through his thoughts. He looked up at a girl, who looks like a pixie with her hairstyle and her face. "I'll carry him for you if you want," she said, smiling at him and his godson. Confused and not trusting this stranger, he said, "That's okay. I got him. You look like you can't even fill that out with your arms full." "I'm not going to hurt him or kidnap him, dear," she giggled. "Although I just might, considering how handsome he is." She knelt down next to them and cooed at the little cub. Harry didn't know her, obviously, but something told her that this girl was to be trusted. He slightly sent out his magic to embrace her, to tell him of her aura and found it was devoid of all evil. Except, there was an extra light to her that he couldn't quite put a finger on. Oh well, he'll have to investigate that some other day. Right now, the stranger was right. He couldn't fill out the forms with Teddy in his arms. He stood up and found they were almost the same height. He held out his right hand and said, "I'm Harry Potter, and this is my godson, Teddy. Say hi to the pretty girl, Cub." If she could blush, she would. Instead she just shook her head and said, "Flattery won't get you anywhere, Mr. Potter." Harry laughed. It was what Hermione would say. "I think I like you, stranger." Alice Cullen laughed. "I think I like you too, cute stranger. My name is Alice Cullen, by the way." She took the cooing Teddy and was immediately consumed by the sounds the little human was making. Rosalie would love him, she thought. He is so handsome, Harry. Harry smiled. "Thanks. I'm sorry, but I would really like it if you don't go anywhere with him without me. I don't trust you yet." "No problem," Alice said. "My parents doesn't trust my siblings and I out with other people either." "You're new here?" Harry asked, already working on his forms with Alice across him playing with Teddy on her lap. "We moved here last year. I'm a junior with my brother Edward. I came to get my schedule for next term and found a better distraction." She grinned at Harry's bowed head. She had seen him coming with the little cutie on her lap, and though she wanted to tell her siblings, she didn't think Edward would handle hearing about a new student so soon after that witch Bella Swan. To think she wanted to be best friends with her. She knew about Harry's secret, of course, being the seer and all, but she liked him. He was a good man and she felt a lifelong connection with this one. Oh, and not to mention that she just might have a new brother-in-law in her life. She grinned down at Teddy and whispered so low that Harry couldn't hear, "Daddy is going to have so much fun this year and the next, isn't he, Teddy Bear? We are going to make sure Daddy has fun, right?" Her only answer was Teddy's chortling. "Oh yeah, Daddy Harry has no idea what's in store for him." The first day of school, Monday, figures, was as it always is, gloomy. Harry wasn't too keen on going back to school, but he never knew when he might need a certificate of graduation. Besides, staying home would only spark more rumors from the residents of Forks and Port Angeles. Merlin, but what these Americans think of, Harry thought, amused. He was at a diner in Port Angeles with Teddy when he heard a middle-aged couple 2 booths over talking about him. "I hear he kidnapped that poor baby and robbed a bank. How else can a teenage boy afford that fancy car? Nobody even knows where he lives except the realtor, and she won't even disclose the address. Suppose he threatened her?" Harry had to subtly cast a silencing charm around him so they won't hear him laughing. Even Teddy was laughing, but Harry based that on the fact he looked pretty stupid laughing at nothing to his son. He wasn't insane yet, thank you very much. The ride home had consisted of Harry informing Teddy of the fickleness of the mind. The couple had stopped Harry on his way out of the diner and embraced him and Teddy to their lovely town. Harry had had the pleasure of having the last word. He said, confused and puzzled, "But, I thought I was a bank robber and a kidnapper. Surely you don't welcome people such as myself to your lovely town." The couple had flushed a bright red and stammered out apologies. Harry just dismissed them and turned his back on them. He got no time for human stupidity. That was yesterday, and the boy who lived wondered if it had spread to Forks by now. If it is in Forks, well, he's going to have a lot of fun with that. Getting himself ready and checking in on the sleeping Teddy, he was once again cursing his stupid self on the decision to go back to school. He was fixing his locket when he heard the telltale sign of his fireplace being activated and a thump. That must be Hermione, he thought. Considering the fact that he didn't have anyone to sit with Teddy, he had recruited Hermione's help in looking after Teddy for the week. Hermione Granger had stayed behind at Hogwarts after their graduation to temporarily fill the defense against the dark arts position while Headmistress McGonagall looks for someone. Being one of the smartest and best duelers, Hermione was the perfect candidate for the job, but Harry didn't like it. He had wanted his friends to have a normal life now that the war was over, but Hermione wanted it. Ron didn't like it either, but he was one to talk. He became an Auror in training immediately after everything. Harry didn't like it, not one single bit. But he couldn't do anything about it. No matter what tactics he'd use, one thing is clear. They were young, yes, but they were too old for the simple things in life. Hermione and Ron knew what Harry wanted for them, so they made it their life mission to see that Harry live as normal a life as can be and have the things that evaded him in his short life. Of course they wanted him to have that life in Muggle London, but hey, what Harry wants, he will get as long as it makes him happy. He grabbed his book bag and headed downstairs to where sounds were coming from the kitchen. He walked in to find Hermione standing over the stove, cooking breakfast. Her hair had grown longer, almost reaching her backside. She had gained height and her posture screamed confidence and a warrior. Her skin was flawless to outsiders, but Harry knew her scars, like he knew his and Ron's. The war might be over, he thought, but we have to live with what we did and what had been done upon us. Stop lurking at the doorway, Harry, Hermione's voice drifted over. It's not very gentlemanly. Harry grinned. Dumping his bag on a kitchen stool, he strode to his sister's side, hugging her to him. Good morning, my own, he said. Thanks for coming. I swear I'll find someone I trust soon. She shook her head, dishing scrambled eggs onto a platter. Teddy's safety and your secrets come first. Besides, school doesn't start until next week, so I have plenty of time to spend with my nephew. Harry adopted a look of hurt, clutching his heart. Only Teddy. Hermione, I'm hurt. Don't you love your poor brother anymore? Hermione smiled and whacked him on the head. Very funny. Now sit down and eat your breakfast or you'll be late for school. Yes, mother. Ducking another swing, he grabbed his plate and headed towards the kitchen table. It was only when Hermione joined him at the table, placing a glass of juice in front of him, did he realize that she wasn't eating. My own, he said. She was rubbing her face in a tired manner. Harry felt guilty. He hated doing this to her. Aren't you eating? Harry, I just woke up in England. What makes you think I want to eat now? I will eat when Teddy has his lunch. Now hurry up. I packed your lunch so you won't eat what the school passes as food. You still need to go to the school office before going to your first class. Harry reached over, dotting his sister on the forehead. What he would do without Hermione in his life he does not know. Thank you, my own. You didn't have to make lunch for me, you know. She yawned, grinning sloppily at him. I know, but Ron made me promise to fix you a good feast for lunch. Besides, you need to fatten up, Harry James Potter. The savior groaned. It was Hermione's and Mrs. Weasley's mission to feed him as much as they can, which annoy him to no end. Muttering darkly under his breath, he stabbed and poked at his food, if only to piss Hermione off. It seems to work, as she poked him rather hard in the ribs. 10 minutes later, he was on his way to school, leaving his heart behind with Teddy. This was the first time he had ever been away from his son for so long, and he found he didn't like it one bit. If he wasn't so afraid of Hermione, he would have turned his Aston Martin around and go back home. The school wasn't that hard to find since it was the only high school in the small town. He made the familiar way towards the staff parking lot near the office. After receiving the slip from a nervous Ms. Trent, Harry was once again in his car, weaving his way to the student parking lot. As soon as his car was in sight, every eye was on it. He couldn't really blame them, as it stood out magnificently in the crowd of beaten and dusty old cars, except for a silver Volvo, a red convertible, and a Jeep. He parked as far away as he could from the crowd. Sitting for a moment in the car, he checked his wand, making sure it was secure and safe from prying eyes. He reached in the back for his bag and caught sight of Teddy's car seat. His throat closed up. He wants to be home with his son. He composed himself, tying his magic to him so it won't erupt any time it likes. His magic was the bane of Hermione's existence, never giving her any peace as it was untrained. Oh well, he'll work on it someday. He took a deep breath, said a little prayer. God, give me patience and the strength to get through today so Hermione won't kill me, because then that would defeat the purpose of me being the boy who lived and all. Then he got out amidst gasps from the girls and envious stares from the guys. Who wouldn't stare? Harry was a masterpiece to behold. Dressed in a loose white long-sleeved dress shirt with black jeans and dragon skin boots, a gift from Charlie, Harry James Potter was the vision of every girl's dream. He looked positively beautiful. His physique wasn't like Victor Crumb's, but he was built just right. His face was a sculpture artists want to get their hands on, and his eyes, oh my, his eyes were a brilliant shade of emerald green, hiding behind his spectacles. Now the glasses would offset the beauty of any person but not Harry. It seemed to make him more, if you know what I mean. Anyway, every eye was on our Lord Potter as he walked towards the school. This should be fun, he thought, chuckling at the reactions of these muggles. 3 classes later and Harry was ready to scream at the top of his lungs. Staring, drooling, flirting. Really, do these people do nothing except salivating after what they obviously can't have? And all of these before lunch. How he could ever have thought that this would be fun is beyond him. There was only so much a guy can take. He had endured whisperings, giggles, fluttering eyelashes, blushes, touching, staring, all during the course of the last 3 classes. He'd take lavender brown over any of these girls any day, thank you for asking. He entered the cafeteria, his destination, and was once again assaulted with silence and stares. He had had enough. For the love of Merlin, what is it? Exclamation mark. Why do you keep staring at me? It's freaking me out. Every face flushed with shame and eyes darted anywhere to avoid the angry new kid. Harry sighed in relief. He was on his way to an empty table when Eric Yorkie waved him over to a table with his friends. He had Eric in his English class and decided the boy was good enough. Reminded him of Seamus Finnegan, really, but without the Irish accent. Heeding one of Hermione's wise words, "You need to make friends outside of us, Harry," he changed his direction, marching over to Eric and his groupies. The Chinese kid stood when Harry reached them. "Hey man." Harry nodded, keeping an eye on the bee-owned bimbo who was trying to catch his eye. "Hello. Well, let me introduce you to the gang. This is my boy Mike Newton," a nod, Angela Weber, Asian girl, Jessica Stanley, blonde bimbo, and Bella Swan, gothic girl. "Guys, this is Harry Potter. He just moved here from England." They exchanged pleasantries. Finally, Harry got to sit down and next to Jessica, much to his dismay. Harry didn't want to unload his food in front of these strangers. It would be hard to explain why his food was still hot when he had taken it out of his bag. Instead he just examined the canteen and the students within, ignoring Jessica's blatant flirting. He was about to give up on finding anything fun when 5 of the most beautiful beings he had ever seen, and that includes the Velas, walked in. He was surprised to see Alice with them but wasn't really. He had made friends with Alice and found her beautiful and odd. Her hands were inhumanly cold when they shook hands, but one doesn't know Hermione Granger and not know some manners, so he didn't remark on it. Afterwards, he had used Phoenix, his magic, to protect him from her cold hands just in case. He had also shielded Teddy from her cold touch too, as he had seen how taken she was with his son. He assessed them. The first guy looked like Victor Crumb's twin, holding hands with a beautiful bee-owned. There was Alice with a bee-owned boy who defines constipation, and the last boy, his heart gave a jolt. No, he shook his head, this can't happen now. He tore his eyes away from them, but they seemed to have a mind of its own as it kept darting towards the lone boy in the group. Bella Swan noted with amusement that the new kid, Harry, wasn't even paying attention to the oblivious Jessica. She turned to see what had caught Harry's fancy and immediately wished she hadn't. It was the Cullens. All of them were looking directly at her, with Rosalie and Alice glaring at her. She rolled her eyes. She didn't care much for them when she dated Edward, and she doesn't care much for them now either. The only one who she cares for is Edward. It was a stupid mistake on her part when she slept with Jacob Black. Sure, she was lonely when Edward went out of town, but hello. That does not mean a girl need to be deprived of certain pleasures. She glanced at Edward, who was ignoring her. She huffed. Fine, if that's how he wants it, then fine. But she will get him back. She turned to Harry, whose attention was still focused entirely at the group of vampires. His face held a look of pain and longing and some other emotions she wasn't too familiar with. "They're the Cullens," she said. Jessica immediately stopped talking. Angela was having the strange sense of déjà vu when the bee-owned started in on her favorite topic. She groaned. "Yeah, they're unnaturally beautiful, aren't they?" Jessica asked with a hint of envy. She brooded for a second before her face lit up with a happy look as she remembered her task. Anyway, the bulk guy is Emmett Cullen and the owned next to him is Rosalie Cullen. That's Alice Cullen, blonde guy is Jasper Cullen and the last one is Edward Cullen. He was with Bella here last year but they didn't last, obviously. Bella poked her. But they're like together, you know. Like together, Jessica continued in a low voice. Like, Alice is with Jasper and Rosalie is with Emmett. Isn't that illegal? But anyway, Dr. and Mrs. Cullen took them in so now they all live together. Isn't that nice of them? I heard that Mrs. Cullen couldn't have kids so that's why they adopt them. Harry could barely control his anger. How dare this chick talk about others like that? Really, does this town do nothing but gossip? They would do well with a couple of Death Eaters in their midst, at least that would stop their talk. But then again, it would only encourage them. He'd have to remedy that. But back to the point of glaring one Jessica Stanley to death. Soon to be dead Jessica Stanley didn't seem to notice the dark look in Harry's eyes and went on, oblivious. Bella said Rosalie is a real bitch, you know. Like always trying to be better in everything and only wants the best for herself. Harry, of course, had had enough. He tried to control himself but Phoenix was itching to get out and wreak havoc. He stood up, voice heard clearly throughout the cafeteria. If anyone here is a bitch, Ms. Stanley, it is yourself and Ms. Swan. One who talks less of others only justifies that label. Half of Forks High School student population sat stunned including the 5 Cullen siblings. Bella stood up in anger. How dare this boy stand in front of her and call her as such? If anything, Rosalie deserved to be called a bitch. Before she could argue her case, however, Harry spoke. He had probed Bella's mind and found her as deceiving and no good as Peter Pettigrew, always willing to ruin others for their own comfort. You, Bella Swan, are a woman scorned of her own doing and is seeking to find ways to destroy one whom you once held close and his family. You would do well to remember, Miss Swan, that you won't get everything you want in this life because you will it so. Keep in mind that not only you would get affected but others as well. He turned to a shocked Jessica. Eric, Angela, and Mike were too dumbfounded to do or say anything on their friend's behalf. Jessica Stanley, there are 2 things I hate more than anything in my life. Death and people like you who gossip about other people because they are insecure of themselves. The Cullens, business is just that, their business. No one in this town or anywhere has the right to talk so blatantly about them. I'm sure you won't like it either if I were to talk so morbidly about your family. Do well to remember that hatred and discord are born from lies and rumors. Harry grabbed his bag, spun around, and leaves. Behind him was a room of silence. One day, just one day, and the new kid had managed to knock down the arrogant Bella Swan and nosy Jessica Stanley. Wow. In the corner of the cafeteria, Alice was smirking. Oh yeah, Harry has a lot of fire and this time, she would have her best friend. And Edward would have his mate. He just had to figure that out himself. Life is a funny thing. It gives you meaning and a reason to live and to enjoy what it offers, but it is also deadly. Some things in life aren't worth knowing or seeing because it kills us to witness it but can't do anything because the deity that be deemed it so. What you are living for may not be what you expected but you make the best of it because you have to or you want to, in some special cases. There is that saying that while death might hurt, it is living that hurts more. Edward Cullen, born Edward Masson, had lived a normal, mortal life with his parents in Chicago when the Spanish influenza hit their town, taking the lives of his beloved parents and him fighting for his life. Carlisle Cullen, the doctor who had worked on him and his parents, may thought he had done the right thing by turning him, but how did he expect Edward to live for life when his own parents were buried 6 feet below? How was he to live when, really, he didn't have anything or anyone to live for? Days turned into weeks, went on to months, stretched into years, and Edward still hadn't accepted his fate, to live as a vampire, the undead walking among the living. He was doomed to live eternally while people around him die. He appreciated, still does, what his father had done to keep him alive, but sometimes, Edward wonders if it is worth it all. Carlisle had dedicated his time to teaching Edward everything about vampires, something the young man had long ago thought were myths until he became one. He was taught one important lesson: to never drink human blood but only that of animals. Years later, Edward still regretted his brief rebellion against Carlisle by attacking humans as some form of vengeance. He had feared Carlisle's reaction to the massacre, but instead of being yelled at like a little child, he had as much as anticipated it. He was merely spared a look of disappointment. Somehow, that pierced his non-existent heart more than if Carlisle would have yelled. For years, it was only the two of them until they came upon Esme Evanson, a woman on the brink of death. Carlisle turned her and found she was his mate, so all turned out for the better, as Edward now not only has a father but a mother as well. It became only the three of them for many years. Edward's belief that life wasn't fair had been proven right many times, as he witnessed many wars, deaths, children ends, avement, and many horrors, that he firmly believed that there was no happiness in the world. It became even clearer when, even at the throes of death, he could hear cries of help from the minds of people. It was discovered that he could read minds, the innermost and private thoughts of another. Through hundreds of years that Edward lived, he had experienced sadness and happiness. Sometimes the sad times overcome his life, but Edward had found ways to deal with the pain. His piano was one of his escapes from the uncertainties and unfairness that was his undead life. He had never understood why people would want to live forever. Who'd want to live with their mistakes? Who'd want to be haunted, day in and day out, by the wrong they had inflicted upon others? Living hurts more than it should be. Edward didn't know that life was to be enjoyed, not dreaded. It pained him enough to see horrors and spoils of war, and he could do nothing to help them. At times, he just wanted it all to end. He had acquired 2 sisters and 2 brothers in his existence: Rosalie, Emmett, Alice, and Jasper. He was used to being alone, so their presence had unnerved him, especially with Rosalie. She had never liked him and his parents. But no matter what he says, their family was whole, as Esme was so fond of saying. Edward didn't think his life could get any worse as he got close to Alice, but he was wrong. All of his family members had found their mates, and he was the only one without someone to complete him. Living over 100 years must account for something, Mother, Edward Said. The Cullens were living in Canada for 5 years since their move from England. It was one rainy day when Carlisle and his brood, save for Edward and Esme, went hunting. Esme was reading by the fireplace when she was interrupted by Edward, standing in front of the living room window. She studied him. She had always been worried for her first son, noticing the longing and lonely look in his eyes whenever he looked at his siblings. She knew what he wanted, but she hated it that she couldn't do anything about it. She was his mother, and it broke her dead heart to see that Edward still hadn't found his mate. She'd ask Alice, her seer of a daughter, time and time again to check his future, if he would find someone. Alice always answers in the no. That afternoon, 4 years ago, Edward had spilled his fears, his wants, desires, needs, and everything to Esme. She gently cradled him to her, soothing his hurting soul, and bandaged his fears. Edward was stubborn, didn't want to believe her, but she was even more stubborn and resolved to make her, little boy, listen to her. He took her words to heart in the end. It was on that very day that Edward's life changed. Alice had seen them moving to a town of Forks, Washington, in the big US of A. It seemed like he might find his mate there. He couldn't read her mind. No matter what he tried, he couldn't. He and his siblings started school at the same time with Bella Swan, though she started 2 weeks after them, the girl who would make him happy, as Alice had said. He wanted to believe it so much, but it was hard to when Bella turned out to be his singer. How can he be happy with her when all he wanted was to be her dry? He left town on the same day she arrived at school. He needed to control himself so as not to kill her. When he had returned, he dated her after convincing himself that she was harmless and he would never hurt another human. Despite Esme's worries, Rosalie's hate, and Carlisle's constant agitation, he dated her. Alice had endured it even when she didn't like it. Her distrust of Bella had stemmed from the fact that she couldn't even read the future where Bella was concerned. It consumed her when Edward admitted he couldn't read her mind. Nothing like that had ever happened before to either of them. Edward had been happy, if only for a while. It was 2 months into their relationship when the young vampire had to leave town again, but it was with his father, as they had business with the Volturi, their kind of a police force for the vampires. It was during that time that Bella had done the unthinkable to the Cullens, little brother and son. 4 days after Edward's leave, Bella had shown up at the Cullens' residence, smelling of say and covered with wolf scent. Esme had been horrified. Rosalie was furious. Alice had dry sobbed at the thought of another sad event in her favorite brother's life. Needless to say, Bella had sported a nasty bruise on her face for her indiscretion courtesy of Rosalie and had been dumped by Edward. Life had never treated me kind, Edward had thought, so why should I be surprised at another failure in my undead life? Ever since the fiasco with Bella last year, Edward gave up on searching for his true mate. It was a month before his junior year with Alice and Jasper when the seer had a vision in the middle of their ballgame. The silent treatment Emmett had treated Alice to the following days was his best yet. She had squealed with unbridled joy, then promptly left them, having no mind of telling them her vision. Weeks later Edward found out that she had gone shopping toys for her teddy bear. For weeks, he tried to glean information from her mind, but the little imp had found a way to block him from her mind. She sings the Oompa Loompa song. It was the first day of school and Edward was not happy. Days before, Alice had disappeared into town, stating she had business to do. Once again, he couldn't get anything from her mind. It wasn't enough that she was torturing him with the Oompa Loompa song, but she just had to bounce into his room at 6 in the morning with declarations of getting to school early because she wanted to catch Harry Potter. Harry Potter, he finally found out, was the kid in her vision a month ago, but that was all he had been told. "You'll see him at school like everyone else," she said. "Stupid seers, stupid sisters," he grumbled under his breath, getting ready for school. He was standing around in the parking lot next to his and his siblings' cars when they heard the roar of an engine before they saw it. Now they wouldn't have paid attention to it, but unlike all the other beat-up old cars that fills the student lot, his silver Volvo, Emmett's Jeep, and the girl's red convertible stands out. This engine sounded new. His face twitched slightly when the car rolled into view. Out of the corner of his eye, Emmett's jaw dropped. The car before them was one only seen on television ads and magazines. "I thought that car wasn't on the US market?" asked Emmett, a hint of envy in his voice. "It's not. Harry said he brought it with him from England. It's beautiful inside, you know," piped up the overly cheerful Alice. The siblings turned to her as one. "You've been inside." Emmett, "Of course." Alice, "He's a stranger." Rosalie, "Babe, how do you know him?" Jasper, "You met him when you left home a few days ago, didn't you?" Edward. Alice laughed, holding up a hand. "Yes, I've been inside. No, he's not a stranger. He's my new friend. I met him a few days ago." Jasper, "And yes, Edward, he's the one I went to meet." Grumbling at their useless seer, they turned again to take in the beauty of the car. It was a midnight black Aston Martin Lagonda, brand new. It was squeaky clean for a car in gloomy weather, but Emmett figured the owner must be a car freak like him. They waited for a few minutes for anyone to exit the car when the door finally opened. Edward felt a strange tightening in his chest when the most beautiful man on earth stepped out. He was dressed in a white, loose-fitting, long-sleeved shirt, over black jeans with dragon skin boots adorning his feet. His hair was black, almost matching the color of his car, and his eyes. Edward could see from he was standing the brilliance of the emerald green eyes hiding behind spectacles. His heart, non-existent and dead as it is, started beating as if it was revived by that thing Carlyle uses on his patients. His sense of everything just flew out of his head. His blood started making its way through his system, rising as the tides in the ocean, begging to work. He didn't know he could feel so alive with just one look at a stranger. Heck, he didn't even feel this way with Bella. He ignored the giggle from Alice when he kept his gaze on the figure walking towards a school building, along with many eyes on the new kid. "Harry Potter," he whispered, feeling a sense of something unidentifiable accompanying the name. All day all he heard, from both mouths and minds, was Harry Potter this, Harry Potter that. He supposes he couldn't blame his peers. He did, after all, spent 3 classes bringing up the image of a green-eyed boy before him. Jasper had said he felt loneliness, longing, sadness, and too many other emotions for him to take. Jasper's an empath, the power to control one's emotions. Lunch hour approached and Edward and his brothers and sisters spent a few minutes outside, just catching up on each other's day. They entered the canteen to find an unusually calm environment whereas it was usually noisy. It wasn't until they sat down at their usual table when they noticed Harry Potter sitting with Bella and her minions. "I wanted him to sit with us," Alice pouted. Edward raised an eyebrow at him. She stuck her tongue out at him. "Are you insane? Did you forget what happened with that bitch?" Rosalie snapped. Alice retorted, "Of course I didn't, but Harry is different. He'll be a part of our family whether you'll approve of him or not, Rosie." Rosalie opened her mouth to say something but was interrupted by Jasper. "She's looking at us." The sisters turned to see Bella and Harry staring at them. Alice and Rosalie glared at her only for Bella to roll her eyes at them. Rosalie growled as Emmett laid a calming hand on her arm. They took a moment to control themselves when they heard Jessica Stanley talking about them. Now they were used to people talking about them, but when they heard her mentioning their mother, Edward snapped. Jasper sent out a calming spell towards his little brother, but it only worked marginally, especially as he had to send one to Rosalie when they heard Jessica mention that Bella told them the blonde girl Cullen was a bitch. They had a momentary shock when Harry stood up in a rage. What was even more surprising were his words to Bella and Jessica. "If anyone here is a bitch, Ms. Stanley, it is yourself and Ms. Swan. One who talks less of others only justifies that label." Edward's jaw may have dropped, but he denied it later on. Rosalie's eyes glinted in devious amusement. Harry continued, "You, Bella Swan, are a woman scorned of her own doing and is seeking to find ways to destroy one whom you once held close and his family. You would do well to remember, Miss Swan, that you won't get everything you want in this life because you will it so. Keep in mind that not only you would get affected but others as well." "The Cullens," sent Alice a disbelieving look. She shook her head. "She won't tell." They turned back to the scene that was now taking precedence in the middle of the cafeteria. "Jessica Stanley, there are two things I hate more than anything in my life: death and people like you who gossip about other people because they are insecure of themselves. The Cullens, business is just that, their business. No one in this town or anywhere has the right to talk so blatantly about them. I'm sure you won't like it either if I were to talk so morbidly about your family. Do well to remember that hatred and discords are born from lies and rumors," Harry said harshly and coldly. They watched as the boy leave the room of stunned students. Alice smirked as Rosalie looked after the kid with respect. Anyone who defends their mother earns themselves a special place in Rosalie's book. Alice watched Edward as he watched Harry walked out. She knew what would happen with these two, but she would let them find out on their own. Fate would not like it if Alice interfered in her plan of getting these two together. Edward sat in his last class of the day, English, in the back row, waiting for Mr. Min and the arriving class. The bell rang, signaling the students to get to classes. He watched as students poured in with Mr. Min among them. He straightened when Harry skidded in just before the last bell rang. He listened to them converse and was mildly nervous when Mr. Min pointed out the empty seat next to him. Edward watched as Harry stared at the seat, then at him, wide-eyed. There was a panic look flitting across his face, but Edward wasn't sure he had seen it as it passed so quickly. He tried to probe his mind but encountered a solid brick wall instead. He couldn't read Harry's mind. It wasn't the same with Bella. With her, there was nothing in her mind. Not a whisper of life, not a hint of breath. But with Harry, it was like he was intentionally blocking his mind, like he knew there were mind readers around him or something. Harry sat down next to him all stiff. Edward watched in slight shock when he moved his desk a little away from him, reminding him of the first time he and Bella had sat next to each other. Before he could say anything to Harry, he heard a pained whisper coming from the boy. "Oh God, Cedric." Hermione knew it wasn't going to be a good day for Harry when he stumbled downstairs half an hour before school started. There were bags under his eyes which were bloodshot red. His color was white as that compares to Draco Malfoy's skin. It was the evidence of the happenings of a nightmare. He had come home yesterday from school pale and depressed, and the presence of his son had lessened some of it somehow, but she guessed it wasn't so at night. It was his first day of school, she thought. How could he be saddened already? As she prepared a cup of coffee for him, it was Harry's #1 rule that no magic allowed in the kitchen unless absolutely necessary. She watched him as he collapsed on a dining chair, hands rubbing his face in an exhausting manner. It broke her to see that he was still suffering from nightmares. Sure, he won't have any more bloody visions from Voldemort, but you can't participate in a war and not have any nightmares. She was one of them. Ron was one of them. Luna and Neville and Ginny, all of them have nightmares, but they are nothing compared to some of the things Harry had gone through. She sat down next to him, placing a cup of coffee in front of him. She waited patiently for Harry to acknowledge her, and as she did, she studied the boy she proudly calls her brother. He had gone through some of the toughest things imaginable, and yet he was still standing strong, if not for himself but for his son. If she had to hazard a guess, the loss he had endured in 4th year was the hardest for him. She remembered the first time he had revealed the identity of his love interest. It was a couple of days after the first task and the reunion of her bull-headed best friends that everything had been made clear. Harry's disappearances at certain times, his happy demeanor, and his calm stature. He had laughed more than he did when his name had come out of the goblet, and even Ron had to admit it was good for him. They were sitting under their favorite tree facing the Black Lake when they were graced with Cedric Diggory's presence. Ron had grudgingly welcomed him and congratulated him on his endeavor with his dragon at the first task, while Hermione simply smiled and invited him to join them. Harry had gone white when Cedric had joined them. They talked for a few minutes before Cedric had revealed the reason why he was there. "I know you guys want nothing more than for me to disappear, but Harry has something to tell you," Cedric had said. He was grinning impishly at one Harry Potter. Harry, on his part, glared at him. "What is it, mate?" Ron asked, looking from Harry to Cedric. Yes, he didn't exactly like Diggory, but he was a good enough mate. Harry sent a pleading look at Cedric, but the older boy wasn't persuaded. "You promised, Harry," he said, confusing the other two. The 4th, unlucky, champion looked at two of the most important people in his life and prayed that they would understand. He didn't know what he would do if they disapproved, because frankly, he was getting tired of people leaving him. He took a deep breath, sending a shaky smile to Hermione, who had leaned over, taking his hands in hers. "Ron, my own, this is, well, you know, but, this is Cedric." "Yes, this is Cedric." Ron, Hermione, and Cedric had all looked at him as if he had grown a second head. Ron had tried to hold in his laughter but failed at the priceless look on his mate's face. Hermione had scolded him, of course, but even she was having a hard time holding in her giggles. Cedric had all but sighed in exasperation. "Harry, love, I think they know who I am," he had said, winking at Harry. It was a subtle, well, not really, way to give Harry some kind of leeway on revealing their relationship. Ron choked on his laughter. "What did you just say?" He once again looked between the two champions seated in front of him. Harry sighed, running a hand through his unruly locks. "Ron, my own, please, I know this will come as a shock to you, but please don't shun me because of it. I love you guys and I just got Ron back and I don't want to lose you both." "Hermione, Ron, this is Cedric Diggory, my boyfriend." He closed his eyes, not wanting to see the disgust on his best friends' faces. It was only a few seconds before a shriek of delight shook him out of his self-despair. He was then assaulted by Hermione, throwing her arms around Harry. He laughed, relieved, and snaked his arms around her. "I take it you approve." She drew back. "Of course I approve. How could you ever think that I won't? Besides, you guys are so cute together." She then turned to Cedric, assessing him. Cedric waited nervously. He hadn't wanted to admit it to Harry then, but Hermione and Ron's approval of him had meant more to him than anyone's approval. He had seen and heard Harry speaking of the other 2/3 of the Golden Trio and knew from Harry the two people who had fought by his side since their first year. They had earned his respect when Harry told him that they wouldn't leave him alone to face Voldemort in first year. Hermione began her interrogation on the boy who had managed to steal her brother's heart. "Do you promise not to hurt him? If you do, Diggory, they won't ever find your body, understand? I love Harry, he's my best friend, and if I find out that you did something to hurt him, by Merlin, I will end your life before you so much," apologizes to Harry. If there is anything that I won't stand by, it is the mistreatment of Harry and Ron. Just promise me you won't do what everyone else had done, Cedric. The Hufflepuff champion smiled and took Hermione in his arms, saying, I'd sooner hurt myself than hurt Harry. I love him, Hermione, so much, and it means a lot to me, to us, that you approve of us. Harry smiled at the scene in front of him and turned to the other person who hadn't said a thing since he had confessed. Ron had gone quiet, just contemplating the boy who was currently in Hermione's arms. To Harry's surprise, Ron just shrugged and laid back down next to them, eyes closed. Hermione raised an eyebrow at Harry and turned to Ron. Cedric took Harry's hand, offering support. She said, Ronald Weasley, what are you doing? I'm relaxing, my own, came the answer from the redhead. Before anyone could say anything, he continued. And yes, I approve. As long as it wasn't Malfoy, I'm all good. Harry had laughed in relief, jerking his best friend up and hugging him. That was the start of a beautiful friendship between the four, but all too soon, it had ended. Hermione was so deep in her memories that she didn't realize Harry had called her name several times. She jerked in surprise, glancing at the concerned look in Harry's eyes. She sighed in frustration. Harry's concern for everyone rather than himself was always his downfall, and heaven knows she always tried to dispel that annoying trait. What happened at school yesterday, Harry? Hermione asked. Well, no need to beat around the bush. She had breakfast to do, and if the clock on the stove was any indication, Harry was going to be late for school. Harry sighed. He looked so much like Seed, my own, he whispered. Who? Edward Cullen. He's a student at school. And Hermione, I thought it was Cedric when I saw him in the canteen. I don't want to do this now, my own. It still hurts. Oh Harry, Hermione sighed. She stood up, hugging the boy to her. Harry reveled in the safety of her embrace, feeling the love and care that the girl had always bestowed upon him and Ron, and now his son. They stayed like that for a few minutes before he withdrew, stating the need to get dressed. Hermione let him go, watching him walk out of the kitchen. It looks like a visit was in order on her last day with Teddy with the rest of the crew. Harry was late for class, half an hour late, to be exact. His first period teacher, a Mr. Mason, wasn't exactly happy, but Harry couldn't give a damn. All day, Harry was on the end of hate from Jessica's and Bella's crew, as if he cared. But what he did care about was the fact that everyone seemed to stare at him more than ever. He would have preferred the wizarding paparazzi over the piercing looks he had received throughout the day. The only upside was Alice Cullen, his new friend. It was a little disconcerting to see her pop up at places he hadn't seen her at yesterday, but one should never look a gift horse in the mouth. As he headed towards the cafeteria, he despaired over the thought that he might receive more stares and such. Obviously, the students of Forks High aren't exactly easily intimidated. Those Death Eaters are sounding more and more promising, Harry thought. He entered the cafeteria and sure enough, he was subjected to more staring and whispers. They are worse than Hogwarts when gossip is running from every mouth, he thought. He ignored them. He would have loved to do something, but he was starting a new life, and a new life does not warrant hexing annoying people at his Muggle school. Mrs. Weasley and Hermione would not like it. So he walked to an empty table, avoiding the looks thrown his way and consequently not seeing Alice waving at him. He sat down, subtly raising a silencing charm around him. Taking out his cold butterbeer from his bag, he transferred his attention to the courtyard, admiring the few plants that were grown there. He was thinking on what Teddy was doing at that moment when he felt a presence touching the charm. He turned to find Mike Newton standing over him, attempting to look menacing and threatening. Behind him was Eric Yorkie, trying valiantly to tug the brunette away from Harry. He took down the charm with a wave of his hand and was immediately hit with Mike's voice. "You think you're better than us, Potter," Mike said, angrily. The emphasis on Harry's surname wasn't exactly up to par with how Malfoy used it, but he was pretty close, pathetic but close. "What do you want, Newton?" Harry asked. He calmly packed his drink in his bag. "I want you to apologize to my girlfriend." "And who is your girlfriend, pray tell?" Mike gave a poor excuse of a growl at Harry. It was all he could do to prevent himself from laughing. "Jessica. You owe her and Bella an apology, Potter." "I don't think so," Harry said. He stood up, shouldering his bag. He shouldered past Mike but was held back when the stupid boy grabbed his arm. Why the hell not? You were rude and out of line yesterday. Harry jerked his arm out of his grasp, his anger now inflating. Phoenix was struggling to get free but he held it back. As far as he was concerned, he didn't want another episode where he killed. If I was rude and out of line, then what were they? I don't like it when people talk so hatefully of others, Newton. If anyone should be apologizing, it should be your friends, not me. Harry walked away but was brought to a halt when Alice cried out. Harry, behind you. He didn't hesitate. He stepped aside to dodge Newton's attack, causing the boy to fall ungracefully on the cold cement floor. Newton stumbled back up, taking a swing at Harry. The wizard grabbed hold of the attacking fist, twisting it behind the idiot boy, resulting in him facing the room with Harry at his back. Harry said softly but was heard throughout the silent room. I don't want to fight you, Newton. You leave me alone and I won't kill you. Deal? Mike Newton was scared but he wasn't going to show it. Yeah right. I'll leave you alone when you apologize to my friends. And I told you that I'm not the one who should be apologizing, Harry said. With that, he pushed Mike away from him, causing him to stumble into a table. He spun around at Harry. To everyone, he may have looked bored but Harry was readying himself for another attack. He got into a defensive stature, right hand itching towards his wand, but thanks to Charlie Weasley, he was adept in hand-to-hand combat. Harry sighed as Mike once again rushed him. He was going to end this foolishness once and for all. He dropped his bag, swinging his right leg upwards, catching Mike in his solar plexus. He doubled over in pain, clutching his stomach. Harry stepped back, reverting back to a defensive stance. When he saw that Mike was down for the count, he relaxed. Reaching down, he grabbed his bag, and walked over to the crouched Mike surrounded by his friends. I'm sorry, Newton, but fighting me will probably end your life, Harry said with a hint of sadness in his voice. He walked out of the canteen, followed by Alice and her siblings. He hurriedly walked towards the gym, intent on letting his anger out. Before he left home that morning, Hermione had used some of her own magic to calm his so he didn't have to worry until he learns to better restrain Phoenix. He banged open the doors, not paying heed to the siblings following him. He dumped his bag on a bleacher followed by his leather jacket. He was wearing a forest green shirt underneath over black jeans and simple sneakers. Alice's eyes glazed over as she saw what was going to happen. She giggled. Sure enough, her vision came true. I love an audience but I love a contender more, Harry said, not even looking over his shoulder at four stunned Cullens. Alice practically skipped over to him. Hello, Harry, she said. He smiled at her. His anger was abating some but he was eager to fight it out. If he was at home, he would have done it with his magic. Hi, Alice, he said, amused at the smug look on her face. Is it me or are you stalking me? It's you, she said. I feel lucky, he deadpanned. You should. Why should I? Because it's not every day I meet a handsome young man with green eyes. I am lucky then. It's not every day I get stalked by a pixie and her siblings. Hey, he chuckled at their banter. It reminded him of his blood sister, Luna Lovegood. And to his surprise, his anger had completely washed away. He turned to take in the rest of her siblings. Alice jumped up, hooking her arm through Harry's. She gestured at her amused brothers, sister, and husband. She motioned towards Jasper, who was closer. This is Jasper, my boyfriend. Next to him is my hulk of a brother Emmett and his girlfriend Rosalie. The brooder next to her is Edward. Guys, this is Harry Potter. Harry nodded politely at the rest of them but kept his gaze averted from Edward's. The vampire, on his part, growled in annoyance. He still couldn't read anything from the human's mind. Emmett said, chuckling, that was brilliant back there, Harry. Harry winced. I didn't mean to hit him but he wouldn't leave me alone so I didn't have a choice. Emmett guffawed, ignoring his wife's look of warning. Harry settled down on the bench with Alice beside him. The rest of the Cullens sat around them. They spent the rest of their lunch hour just talking and getting to know each other. There was an incident where Alice's eyes glazed over but luckily for her siblings, Harry didn't notice. Or so they thought. When Alice's eyes cleared, Harry nonchalantly remarked, "You didn't tell me you were a seer." Silence fell over them. Rosalie's eyes widened a bit while her husband and brothers looked gobsmacked. Alice herself looked stricken. She didn't even see this moment. Harry sighed, waving a hand in their direction. "Don't worry, I won't tell anyone." Jasper said softly. "How do you know?" "My blood sister is a seer," Harry answered. "She had one before I came here, said I would meet one. I just didn't know it was you." Edward suddenly stood up, growling at Harry. "How do you know we can trust him, Alice?" His question was directed at his sister but was glaring at Harry, who was still avoiding looking at him. "Yes," Rosalie provided. "We're already in enough trouble with Swan, Alice, we don't need another one." "Hush, Rosie. Harry isn't trouble. I told you before, we're going to be great friends," Alice cried. Harry raised an eyebrow at her. "We're all going to be great friends." Alice grinned. "Yup. I don't think so. I like you, Alice, but I don't really trust your siblings. And forgive me, but I'd rather spend time with a werewolf than in the company of Edward." With that, Harry stood up, gathered his jacket and bag, and walked out, leaving behind 5 stunned vampires. Edward didn't waste any time from running after Harry. For a human, he can be pretty fast, he mused. He caught up to Harry in the student parking lot. As Harry was getting into his car, Edward grabbed his arm. "What is your problem with me, Harry?" Edward asked in a low voice. Harry swallowed, pained to be in such close proximity to the boy who reminds him a lot of his late lover. "Nothing, just please, leave me alone," Harry croaked out. "No," Edward growled. He jerked Harry close to him. Ever since yesterday in English class, Edward had thought a lot of the boy in front of him. He didn't know why he wanted so much to be close to him, but he knew that should he ever separate from him or Harry hurt in any way, he didn't know what he would do. "You remind me of someone I knew, okay?" Harry yelled at him. Edward let go of him in surprise and pain, his ears were ringing. "Just leave me alone, all right? Please." He watched as Harry jumped in his car and drove away, screeching his way out of the student parking lot. Edward looked after him till the car was unrecognizable. He felt more than anger from Harry, and he resolved to find his way into his life, one way or another. Esme Cullen watched as her children trickled in solemnly. She didn't have to be an empath like Jasper to know that the camaraderie between them was tense. Without a word, she led them into the living room, settling on a pristine white couch next to Edward. Across from her sat Rosalie and Emmett, with Alice and Jasper on a single chair, with the seer on her husband's lap. "What's wrong?" Esme asked no one in particular. Each of the siblings looked at each other, challenging the other to tell their mother. Alice huffed when her siblings eyed her. She turned to Esme. "Harry knows I'm a seer," she declared. Esme startled. "How can that be?" "Did you see?" Alice huffed once again. "No," she pouted. "Like I told you guys, I only see smidgens of the future where he is concerned. It was like with Isabella, but with her future wasn't made, exactly. But with Harry, he's uncertain of a lot of things, making it hard for me to tell his future." The family fell silent. Esme pondered over the human enigma her children had told her. They had come home yesterday, talking of the new student, Harry Potter. Apparently, he had defended them without hesitation when Bella and the Stanley girl insulted her family. She was surprised, to say the least. Even Carlisle had commended the boy. They had been at Forks for a few years now, and not once had they been defended against the rumors about them. Already she was feeling maternal about the boy, even more when Alice had revealed he lived on his own at the house rumored to be haunted. She already wanted to meet the boy Alice had so reverently described to her. Lithe body, sculpted face, illuminating green eyes, and raven black hair that looked like he had just rolled out of bed no matter how many times it was tamed. "Will he tell?" Esme asked, not specifying her question. Alice shook her head. That was one thing clear to her. He would never reveal her secret and secrets when he finds out theirs. She paused in moment, wondering if she should tell her mother about Harry being Edward's mate, then decided against it. They would all learn sooner or later. Rosalie growled when she saw the smile on Alice's face. "I hardly think this is the time for you to be happy, Alice." "No," the bubbly girl chirped cheerfully. But I did see something that is very entertaining when we come back to school on Monday. What? She shook her head at her family. The rest of the week is full of sunshine, so no Harry until Monday. She giggled when she heard the frustrated growl from her younger brother. No worries, Eddie, you will see your Harry on Monday, like I said. Edward glared at her, ignoring Emmett's chuckles and Esme's amused gaze. He is not my anything, Al. He stretched the nickname he knew Alice hated. Sure enough, she glared at him. Huffing in indignation, she stood up, making her way to the stairs, mumbling under her breath, knowing Edward heard, I won't be sure of that, Eddie. It was Saturday with the week flying by seemingly without Harry noticing it. His week was great since the Cullens weren't in school, although he did miss Alice. No one, to his pleasant surprise, had approached him since the incident in the cafeteria. Rumor had it he was a psychopath on the run from the British police, and now he was there to cause mayhem to the small town of Forks. He had snorted in amusement when he overheard two girls discussing said rumor. He didn't care for them then, since the upside was he was now alone. There were no more annoying questions of how he was liking Forks, no more girls flitting up to him, batting their eyelashes, and flirting with him. And best of all, Mike Newton didn't get it into his head to attack him anymore. That didn't stop the boy from glaring at Harry, though. Despite his firm convictions that he didn't miss them all whatsoever, the savior of the wizarding world did miss the Cullen siblings, Edward especially. Sure, he reminded him of his late lover, and he could already see some of Cedric's personality in him, but there was just something entirely different from Cedric about Edward. He knew one thing. Whereas Cedric had been whole, loved and wholesome, there was something about Edward that screamed broken. When he had been grabbed by the boy with beautiful topaz eyes, Harry had seen a soul that was lonely and hungry for something, anything. It was calm, but there was a storm brewing that he wasn't sure he wanted to know of. His own soul and heart was broken. He didn't need another in his life. All he needed and wanted was his son. He was also pondering over the characteristics of the Cullens. All of them had cold hands. They were too pale, even more so than Vila's. There was also the matter of their eye color, which all looked eerily alike. For adopted children, they do have the same outward physical appearances. The only thing different were their hair color, and that wasn't much. All week he had marveled over them, researching many possibilities on who or what they were. He had a nagging suspicion on just what kind of creature they were, but he was occupied at the time, so he didn't have much information. Anyway, it was Sunday and Harry was panicking. Tomorrow was Monday, the last day Hermione would be able to babysit, and he still didn't have a babysitter. After witnessing the many faults and flaws of the townspeople, Harry wasn't sure he wanted any of them to look after his son. Harry was woken up rather harshly. He was in the middle of a very nice, very rare dream when he heard grumbling and footsteps from downstairs. He looked at his clock on his nightstand bleary-eyed. It was only 5:30. Hermione always arrives at 6:15 on the dot. Checking in on his son to find him sleeping peacefully with his arms around his wolf, he cautiously walked down the stairs. He could hear about 4 or 5 voices coming from the direction of his living room and crept quietly but quickly towards the room. He looked around the corner and to his surprise, found his makeshift family standing around, arguing with each other. Deciding to not make his presence known yet, he contented himself in watching the show. I told you guys to shut up. Hermione scolded her friends. What's the point? He'll wake up pretty soon, anyway. Yes, but not for another hour. Oh Hermione, don't worry, he won't get mad. Did you know you have nargles on your hair? Yes, maybe that explains your mood. Luna, I do not have nargles on my hair. What I do have is you guys on my nerves. Now since you're here, make yourselves useful and clean up this mess. When you're all done, meet me in the kitchen. And no magic in the kitchen, Ronald. Ah, my own, the Muggle way takes too long. I'm starving. You're always starving, you lard. Hey, show some respect for your older brother. Ron, the only time Ginny shows some respect for you is when you don't talk about food and you actually let your intelligence shine through. Don't pick on me so early in the morning. Luna, you're on my side, right? I don't know, Ronald, it depends on the humpernickels on your clothes. I'll get back to you later. I don't even know why I put up with you guys. Because you love us. Yes, rather unfortunate, in my opinion. Harry couldn't help it. He burst out laughing, startling his friends. He came fully in the room, causing 4 occupants to flush in shame. Luna just gave him her beautiful smile, walking towards him. She embraced him and he returned the hug eagerly. He had missed her, missed all of them. He had only just released the blonde girl when he was attacked by the female Weasley. Laughing, he hugged her back, reaching out a hand to clasp Neville's. Ron just slapped his back and walked out after Hermione, calling out, "When will breakfast be ready, Myone? Honestly, is your stomach all you think about?" The 4 in the room laughed when they heard Hermione snapped at her boyfriend. Harry turned back to Luna, Ginny, and Neville. Gesturing for them to sit, he sat down on a couch with Luna while Ginny and Neville took the opposite one. "What are you guys doing here? I mean, it's not that I'm not happy because I am, but I thought you guys were busy." Ginny smiled tenderly at Harry. They had only dated for a couple of months in his 6th year, and during that time, she had felt bereft. Like there was something wrong with their relationship. It was only when Luna pointed out that they were more suited to be brother and sister that she realized that it was that feeling she had felt whenever they Ed. Now they were best friends, if not brother and sister. "Neville and Ron were granted today off from training so we can visit you," Ginny said. "But what about your job, Gin?" Harry asked, confused. "I decided to do a little bit of traveling first," Ginny said. "I wasn't quite ready as I thought I was, so I'm going to Egypt for a while with Bill and Fleur until I'm ready." Harry smiled, relieved. "That's good. Did you tell your parents?" Ginny laughed. "Yes, Mother." Harry blushed. "Hey." Neville just laughed at the two. It was refreshing to see Harry act his age. They all are. They all thought that the war would be the hard part, but it was the aftermath that was the hardest. They couldn't live with the thought of so many lives lost, and the fact that they lived while others perished made it even harder, especially for Harry. Neville had to admit that having Teddy in Harry's life made it easier for the heir to recover. He said, "So how have you been, Harry? Hermione told us you were doing fine, but she also mentioned that you were troubled by someone in school." Harry rolled his eyes. They would never quit worrying about him. It was endearing but overbearing at times. Before he could answer, however, Luna's tilting voice spoke up. "He's not of any trouble to Harry. He will be good for Harry as our Lord of Many will be for him." Harry looked at his sister, expecting her encountering a vision, but was somber for once. She smiled at him, reaching forward to kiss him on the forehead. She stood up, saying, "My nephew is waking up." Sure enough, Teddy's cries were sounded throughout the house. Immediately, Ginny stood up and ran up the stairs, yelling, "I got him first." Neville laughed when Luna gathered up her impressive skirt and followed the redhead. Harry and Neville headed towards the kitchen where Ron was sulking at the kitchen table while Hermione cooked at the stove, calm as can be. Laughing once more, Harry headed back out, deciding to get ready while his family was settling in. He was almost to the stairs when he realized one missing member. Turning back to Neville, he inquired, "Where's Draco?" Before the herbology apprentice could speak, Ron yelled out, "He's on his way over," said he had to pick something up. Something about Ron's tone made Harry curious, but he let it go. It was too early in the morning to think. Bypassing Teddy's nursery, he chuckled at his sisters, arguing over what kind of outfit Teddy would wear while his poor cub stared wide-eyed at his 2 aunts. He continued on to his room. 10 minutes later, Harry, clad in denim jeans, white shirt with a beautiful black overcoat and dress shoes, headed downstairs. Knowing Draco was a plus yet painful experience as the aristocratic blonde takes to fashion as bees to honey. "It seems like his outfit surpasses inspection," as Ginny whistled appreciatively. Blushing beautifully, Harry sat between Neville and Ron, the latter sulking and glaring at his girlfriend. Shaking his head, Harry turned to where Luna was talking animatedly to Teddy in his high seat, occasionally punctuating her words with her hands. Teddy, on his part, gurgled and gushed at the blonde seer. He sat, thanking every deity above that he was blessed with a wonderful family. There was the sound of an engine running smoothly heard from the front yard as Ginny set the table. Confused, Harry looked at his friends only to find them going on with their activities. He shook his head, standing up to check it out when the sound of the front door opened and closed. "Honey, I'm home," Ron grumbled. Neville smiled. Luna and Ginny giggled. Hermione sighed, and Harry rolled his eyes. Draco, of course. They turned to the doorway when the blonde stepped through dressed formally, as usual. After exchanging more pleasantries, the pack carried on with breakfast, entertained with Teddy throwing his food at Luna. Harry was reluctant to leave, but at the glare sent his way from Hermione and Draco, he changed his mind. Harry stammered when he was walked like a child to the door by everyone. He opened the door to see a white Escalade parked behind his Lagonda. Raising an eyebrow at his gathering siblings, he said, "And what is this? You didn't actually think we're going to spend the rest of the day in the house, do you, Potter?" Draco drawled contemptuously. "You know what? I'm not even gonna ask." Harry sighed. Dotting his son on the forehead and relinquishing him to Ginny, he walked towards his car, waving goodbyes behind him. Harry collapsed on a chair at his now deemed Potter table, in the cafeteria, exhausted. If it wasn't for Alice throughout the day, he would have had given up and go straight back home. He was surprised when he arrived that morning to find the red convertible and silver Volvo in the parking lot, knowing immediately that the Cullens were back. Throughout his classes, he had despaired over the dreaded English class with Edward. And of course, you can't forget his knowledge of Alice's abilities. He didn't know what her brothers and sister said to that development, but he hoped they wouldn't ask any questions. In addition to this trouble, he was once again threatened by Newton. He had the insolent boy in his second period of biology. He was just doing his work quietly with Angela Weber, the only one of Newton's friends who wasn't out for his head, when Mike settled slowly in front of their table and said, "If you don't apologize to my friends by the end of today, I'm going to get you after school in the parking lot, Potter." Harry didn't help matters much when he laughed in Mike's face, but hey, when you fought a mad wizard for 7 years, you don't scare easily. So now he was face down on his table, grumbling about sisters who won't cut me some slack, and brothers who are way too superior for their own good. Across the room at their usual corner, the Cullen siblings smirked at Harry's mumbling. Edward tilted his head away from his family so they won't see his smile. He had missed the new boy during the week, but for what reason he could not fathom. All he knew was that suddenly, his life was too dull without Harry. Every night he had wanted to run to his house to watch him, much like he had done with Bella. But every time, Alice persuaded him to leave it. Harry was a private boy and she was sure he wouldn't like it when Edward confesses that he used to watch him at night. Again, Harry's future wasn't definitive. Besides, the surprise on Monday would not be a surprise if he knows already. The first 10 minutes of the lunch hour passed peacefully, yeah right, when the doors suddenly opened. Edward glanced towards it, as were his siblings and the rest of the occupants of the room. There stood 3 boys and 3 girls in a carrier. Maybe calling them boys and girls were an understatement. They were men and women. Like Harry, they all held a distinctive air around them, and their posture and demeanor were that more of a warrior or soldier. Their smells were also similar to Harry's, Edward concluded, and judging from his siblings' expressions, they found it too. 2 of them were red-headed, and if Edward had to hazard a guess, they were brother and sister. The red-headed male was the tallest one in the group. He was a handsome man with his red hair almost brushing his shirt collar. His blue eyes stood out from his freckled face. His female version was petite and curvaceous for a young woman. She was dressed comfortably in jeans and a simple t-shirt, but it didn't cover her beauty entirely. Her face was a vision of every guy's dream, on par with the blonde girl and brunette with her. The brunette was, without a doubt, the matron of the group. Her posture screamed of experience dealt with children, and her confidence and courage shone through. Her brown curls cascaded neatly down her slim waist. The bee-owned girl next to her was the oddest one of them, with her carrot earrings and mismatched attire, but strangely, it enhances her own beauty. The other 2 boys were obviously different from each other. The one with the silver-gray eyes and blonde hair was gorgeous. He might have been looking around him with a look of disgust on his face, and yes, it wasn't quite appealing, but he was gorgeous nonetheless. The last man of the group wasn't quite beautiful as his counterparts, but he was still handsome. Their presence was unexpected, and what was even more unexpected was the baby carriage that was carried by the male brunette. Everyone watched, captivated, as the blonde girl turned to say something to her group. As one, they gazed at the table which seated Harry. Ignoring every eye on them, they walked towards the table. Before they reached their destination, however, a cry went up from the carrier. Harry's head jerked up at the sound and his eyes met the sight of his siblings. His eyes widened, and to everyone's amazement, a laugh emerged. In the week that the new kid had been at school, he had never smiled nor laughs. "What are you guys doing here?" Harry exclaimed, standing up to meet the group. "Visiting you, of course," came a dreamy voice from the assembled group. Edward watched, entranced, as Harry bent down to the carriage and picked up a baby, cooing all the while. "How's my teddy? You've been a good boy for your aunties and uncles, yes? Did you make trouble for Uncle Dragon?" "I hope you did, my little cub," Edward heard Harry said in a soft voice. Alice giggled at the scene while Rosalie looked at them with a pensive look on her face. "Hey, I'll have you know that I am his favorite uncle, Potter," the aristocrat retorted. "How would you know?" the male redhead teased. "Teddy's only 4 months old, Dragon. For all you know, I could be his favorite uncle." There was a burst of laughter from the intriguing group, completed with a shriek of joy from the baby in Harry's arms. The redhead glared at them, affronted. Harry shook his head, chuckling. "Come on, stop teasing Ron. Sit down and tell me why you're all here." The students of Forks High looked on as the new boy laughed and talked more than he had since he started. Harry and his comrades had fought against vampires, among other creatures, during the final battle. Due to the constant fight to protect himself against many attackers, he didn't take the time to take notes on vampires. Yes, he had learned them in his classes, but being Harry, he forgets everything easily. Harry found out sometime after the war that he was heir to many titles and family lines. They will be revealed further on in the story. I know that some of you are impatient to see more Harry-Edward interaction, but I have never liked reading the two main characters getting it on so early in the story. I wanted them to know more about each other and get comfortable with one another before I put them together. I hope you won't bite me. Thanks for sticking with me this far. Teddy bear. Alice's shriek garnered the attention of Harry, his family, her siblings, and those who found the effort to tear their gaze away from the group who was as beautiful as the Cullens. Edward turned to her with a frown. "Who's Teddy, Alice?" "The baby, Harry's son," Alice informed him over her shoulder as she was already making her way towards Harry. Edward, Jasper, Rosalie, and Emmett glanced at each other, slightly shocked. Edward was experiencing a feeling that almost felt like jealousy that someone had already claimed Harry Potter. As if coming to an agreement, they stood up, following their seer. Harry and his siblings watched the procession towards them. He had promptly warmed Teddy with his magic when he heard the cry from Alice. He spared a glance at his family to see looks of bewilderment on their faces save for Luna. She was smiling contentedly at the pixie-like vampire heading their way. Alice reached them, and although she was normally a polite girl, she didn't give any mind to the others. Her attention was focused mainly on the baby in Harry's arms. "May I, please?" she asked happily. Chuckling, Harry transferred his cub from his arms to Alice's. Immediately, she was talking baby talk to him, giggling when Teddy would grab her finger. Harry looked up at a pinch on his side. He glared at Neville, who didn't show an ounce of shame on his face. He just said, "Introductions, Harry." The boy who lived looked behind Alice at her assembling siblings. Emmett was grinning at him. Jasper looked contemplative instead of his usual pained expression. Rosalie was glaring at Alice, but the wizards and witches could see a look of despondency on her beautiful face, and Edward was just looking. He didn't cover the fact that he was staring intently at Harry, as if by doing so, the boy would just give him his attention, or open his mind to him. Before Harry could begin the introductions, he was interrupted by Emmett, who was guffawing heartily. "Harry, you dog, who's the lucky lady?" Emmett, Rosalie, Edward, and Alice cried. Ron laughed along with Emmett at Harry's red face. Both Ron and Emmett paid neither attention at the swats they received from their respective ladies. "I like you, mate," Ron told Emmett once he got over his laughter. Emmett grinned at him, holding out his hand. "I like you, too. Name's Emmett Cullen." Ron took the offered hand, taking note of the coldness of it. Ron Weasley. He draped an arm around Hermione's waist. This beautiful lady here is my girlfriend, Hermione Granger. Hermione held out a hand to Emmett. Hello, she said, glancing at Rosalie. Oh, where are my manners? Emmett mock groaned, slapping his forehead. Ron, Hermione, this is my beautiful lady, Rosalie Hale Cullen. Hermione's hand was thwarted when the blonde girl just raised her nose at it. Blushing, the witch drew back. That wasn't nice, a dreamy voice stated. They all turned to Luna, who was looking dreamily at Rosalie. You should always be polite, Rosalie Hale Cullen, to others. It seems you are a vain person. But don't worry, we can fix it. We did fix Dragon, after all. Ginny buried her face in Neville's shoulder, her own shaking, as Hermione scolded Luna, red-faced. Draco smirked at the wide-eyed and angry Rosalie, choosing instead to ignore the dig at him. Harry draped an arm around Luna, drawing her away from Hermione's tongue lashing, tucking her perfectly against him. He whispered in her ear, Davina, you're going to give Hermione a heart attack one of these days. Luna grinned up at him. He shook his head at her, exasperated. It was always one of the pack's challenges to see who can give Hermione the most headaches with their antics. Harry didn't like it, but he had to admit, it was pretty funny. But Luna was a special case, as she always speaks her mind, no matter how embarrassing it is. Ginny composed herself, withdrawing from Neville's protection. She faced the amused Cullens in front of her save for Rosalie. Forgive Luna for that, she always had the tendency to speak her mind. At this, she glared at the seer. My name's Ginny Weasley, this is my brother Neville Longbottom. That's Luna Lovegood Potter and Draco Malfoy. And that's my nephew, Teddy Lupin Potter in your arms, Harry's son. Immediately the talk started up again at this new revelation. The student body were thinking along the same line. The reclusive Harry Potter has a son. And that odd-looking girl is his wife. Edward, privy to their thoughts, winced at some of the things his peers were thinking up of. Some of them were so demeaning it is not appropriate for this harmless story. Seems like everyone has different opinions on Harry and his son. Edward himself wasn't feeling very confident in himself. He supposed it was too good to be true. He had spent the last week pondering over his feelings on Harry Potter. It wasn't entirely uncomfortable, but it wasn't safe. Something Alice had said about his future made him wonder just what kind of angel would be willing to help him win this young man's heart and have him by his side for all eternity. As tempting as it sounds, Harry was a human, and he knew that he would never become a vampire voluntarily just because of Edward. The vampire wasn't entirely sure of his own feelings. It was new, and though it might be a little unwelcome, it didn't bother him. The only thing that worries him was his dead heart. After Bella, he wasn't sure he could handle one more hurt. He might be invincible and immortal, but his feelings aren't. With his heart in his throat, he looked upon Harry and the blonde girl, Luna. He reminded himself being comfortable with one another. He could tell from the look in Harry's eyes that he very much loves her. He looked away, missing the amused expression on Luna's face. Alice took the time to tear her gaze from the baby in her arms to introduce her own family. Smiling broadly at Harry's family, she said, I'm Alice. This is my boyfriend Jasper, and the brooder next to him is my brother Edward. You know Emmett and Rosalie. Forgive Rosalie, she's always like that. Neville gave the Cullen siblings in front of him a small smile. Something about them bothered him, and from the look in Ron's eyes, he knew that he, too, found it. He had tensed when he saw the last Cullen. He looked like Cedric, and the wizard knew immediately just who it was that had bothered Harry at his new school. He sighed. How can Harry heal when he would be facing a solid reminder at school every day? Sure, he knew Harry still had pictures of his late lover at home, but he also knew that his brother had stored them away so he wouldn't look at it. Neville glanced at the others and knew what they were thinking if the looks on their faces is anything to go by. He met Ginny's eyes and saw a sheen of tears. He draped an arm around her shoulders. Draco growled when he saw Edward Cullen. So, this must be the one whom Griffin was worried about, he thought. The guy looked so much like Cedric that for one second, Draco had thought the Hufflepuff champion had come back to life. He glared at Davina, who was smiling beatifically at the ceiling, apparently ignoring everyone around her. He rolled his eyes at her. There was something about the Cullens that was bothering him, though. They looked too pale to be healthy. They were more pale-ish than him. He had an inkling on who or what exactly they were, but he wasn't sure. He chanced to look at Hermione, and judging from the look on her face, she had figured it out. Harry rolled his eyes when he heard Draco's grumbling of annoying sisters. He turned to glare at the blonde before addressing Alice again. So, let's get out of here, shall we? Don't like the, staring much. Sure enough, the whole canteen was feasting their eyes upon them, even Bella and her table. The others seemed to finally notice where they were at the moment and quickly heeded Harry's request. Once they got outside, Draco grabbed Harry's and Hermione's arms, dragging them towards the other side of the courtyard, making some excuse to their siblings and Harry's friends. Draco didn't say anything until there were a good many feet between them and the others. He could see Edward Cullen looking suspiciously at them. He glared at him, ignoring Luna's own glare. Hermione subtly threw up a silencing charm around them before turning to Draco. What is it? Draco looked at Harry, who was also looking at him in curiosity. How much do you know about the Cullens, Phoenix? Harry adopted a look of confusion. What does that have to do with anything? Just answer the question, Harry, Draco snapped. Hermione glared at him. Draco rolled his eyes. Harry narrowed his eyes at Draco. What is this about, Draco? Tell me honestly. Draco debated with himself. If he tells them of his suspicions, Harry would flip, especially if it turns out to not be true. But if he didn't, well, he doesn't know exactly what will happen. Seeing the impatient look on Hermione and Harry's faces, he decided to reveal his discoveries. I don't think the Cullens are human, he said. Both the wizard and witch didn't look surprised. Hermione nodded. I thought as much. Emmett's hand was too cold for it to be the result of this weather. Their eye colors were too much alike and also familiar. Harry's suspicions were now confirmed by Draco. The Cullens weren't human. He knew with the knowledge Hermione and Draco possessed that they knew what they were, but he wasn't sure if he wanted to know. They're vampires, Draco revealed, an undertone of anger in his tone. Harry groaned. So much for not wanting to know. It has been 2 months since Harry and the pack found out about the Cullens situation. It has been 2 months since Draco and Luna stayed behind with Harry and Teddy. It has been 2 months since Alice has been an honorary member of the pack. It has been 2 months since Harry came to accept the fact that someone else bores the face of his late lover. It was Friday, day before Halloween, and the Lion's Den was already decked out in Halloween decorations. Harry wasn't very appreciative of the holiday. Who could blame the guy? His past experiences with Halloween weren't very memorable, but as this was Teddy's first, he was willing to put up with it, even if the little guy doesn't understand it. He was currently in his room, lamenting on the enigma that is the Cullens. After Draco's revelation of their true nature, Harry had forbid all of them to reveal what they knew. He didn't want to reveal what he is, so it wasn't exactly fair for them to know what the Cullens were when he won't even tell of his secrets. So Draco had, albeit exasperated and angry, kept his mouth under lock and key. Luna had told of their powers. Hermione and Ginny had groaned when their seer mentioned Alice Cullen as a fellow seer. They would have to deal with not only one future teller but now 2. Alice and Luna had immediately become friends after that first day of the pack gracing Forks High with their presence. When learned of Edward Cullen's power to read minds, the pack had at once strengthened their occlumency barriers. Years of constantly fighting had made them weary of those who have the power of mind reading. Harry could tell the frustration etched on the young vampire's face whenever he, Draco, or Luna was around. He knew that the only thing the vampire encounters when invading their minds were solid metal walls. Draco was especially smug about this development. Harry had spent time studying Edward. At lunch, in gym, after school, he was always studying the century-old vampire. He had deduced from his observations and conversations with Edward that he was an intelligent man. He was just as protective of his family as they were themselves. He has a sense of humor, could hold up his end of his conversations with Draco. He has a playful side underneath his gruff exterior. He also has a gentle side. Despite what he had said to Alice about being friends with a werewolf was better than Edward. Despite his reservations of the rest of the Cullen siblings, Harry had come to like them and even counted them as friends. Of course, Rosalie didn't even make the list, but the young wizard knew that with time, the bee-owned vampire would come around. The only time Harry would see her mellowed out was when Teddy was around. Her face would soften and Harry was heartened to see her smile. She really is beautiful when she's not scowling, Harry mused. Alice had introduced the pack to her parents when she had learned of Harry's predicament in the matters of Teddy's babysitter. She had one weekend, when the pack was visiting Harry, Draco, Luna, and Teddy, taken them to her home to meet her parents. Ron had put up quite a fight when learning of their visit to death, but under the threats of his girlfriend, had calmed down. If you could count the various weapons they found on his person the day they were to meet the older Cullens, calmed down. Since then, Esme Cullen became the pack's cub's babysitter. Harry, not to mention his girls, were gratified to find that Teddy had liked Esme immediately. They were a bit hesitant seeing as Teddy constantly changes his appearance, but of course Hermione came through. She had cast a spell on the baby to keep his appearance the same for 6 hours. Draco had laughed when Rosalie didn't show up to school for the first week of Esme's job of babysitting. Harry had worried that the vampire would try to steal his son when he saw how much Rosalie was constantly around Teddy. He had calmed considerably when Luna assured him that such a thing won't happen. Of course she didn't tell him Rosalie didn't have any reason to kidnap Teddy, seeing as how Harry and Teddy would become a part of the Cullen family, but that's neither here nor there. Harry was drawn out of his musings when Luna skipped in. His eyes widened at her attire. Before he could utter a syllable, Draco stormed in behind her. His eyes flashed angrily, his face was flushed with anger. Harry winced when Draco yelled at him. "Harry James Potter, you tell your sister right now to change, or I swear by Merlin, I will hex her." "Dragon, she's right there," Harry said. Apparently this was the wrong thing to say. "I know that, you get. I have been trying to get her to change for the past half hour, but she won't listen. I tried to change it, but she had cast on spell on her clothes to repel any spells. Harry, what I will do to her is less bad than what Griffin would do when she sees your insufferable sister." Harry looked at Luna again. The witch was sitting serenely on Harry's bed, without a care for the argument going on around her. She was wearing shorts so short that Harry thought it should be illegal. On her feet were inch-high boots that traveled up her long legs. She was wearing a white long-sleeve shirt that was tied just under her B-easts, showing her midriff, the top 2 buttons unloosed. Around her neck was a choker adorned with the animagus, forms of her siblings. Her hair was dyed black with the tips in red, she had makeup on her face. Hanging from her ear lobes weren't her usual jewelry but large silver hoops. Harry shook his head at Luna, exasperated. How was he going to make both parties happy without offending the other? "Luna, what is this?" Luna smiled dreamily at him, ignoring Draco's growl. "It's Halloween, Phoenix. I know that, Davina, but why are you dressed like this? And to school, of all places. The headmaster of the school said we could dress up today. I know, but you have to keep to the school dress code, love. I don't think the headmaster would appreciate you showing up like this. But it's the day to be anyone you want to be, Harry, and I want to be a hooker." Harry choked on his own breathing. Draco glanced at him in annoyance as if he was deliberately avoiding dealing with his sister. He didn't know what a hooker was. Harry stared wide-eyed at the smirking witch. "Luna, go change, please. You can dress like that to the party tomorrow night but not today," Harry said. Luna shook her head. "No, I want to go to school like this. I overheard Isabella calling me a slut to her friends, so I want to do this, Harry. I promise I'll change after I do what I have to do." "And what is it that you need to do?" Draco drawled. He bore the appearance of a bored person, but inside he was seething at the bullying Luna had been subjected to since they started. Everyone had automatically assumed Luna was Harry's wife and the baby hers ever since that day they showed up at school unannounced. Harry had tried to defuse the fire, but Luna had refused for him to do so. Why? It was anyone's guess, but the men of the pack always felt like tearing one apart when Draco would talk of whatever happened. It didn't help whenever Luna was seen walking arm in arm with Draco or dotting Harry on the cheek. Isabella and her crew were the worst. They seized any chance they have to bully the new girl. Apparently, Luna's association with the Cullens does nothing but ignite the fire of hatred for her. She was even less of a favorite when the pack and the Cullens came upon Mike Newton and his friends in the parking lot that day. Before Newton could even instigate the fight, Luna had serenely walked up to him, smiled dreamily, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "I will castrate you if you so much come near us again. The one you need to worry about is your girlfriend. She's not very honest with you, you know. You should ask an Eric Yorkie. He did spend last night with your girlfriend at her place." Since then, Harry and Draco had to stand by and watch as their sister received the brunt of everyone's hate, especially as the second golden couple of Forks High broke up because of her. And still 2 months later, nothing has changed. Harry wondered how long he is going to hold in his anger before releasing it on the ignorant students of their new school. "Are you not worried what Griffin would say when she sees you, Davina?" Draco asked. Luna smiled dreamily at her boys. "Of course not. I am a seer, you know. She would throw a fit, but she would let me go as I am." True to her word, Hermione had ranted and raved while Neville and Ron tried to cover her up without much success. Eventually, their Griffin eased up on their seer and they were on their way to school. When the gang learned of the school's Halloween dance after class hours, they had jumped at the chance to see how Muggles celebrate it. Ginny had flowed from Egypt, Hermione had relinquished her class to an Aura McGonagall had recruited to take over her DADA class for the day. Neville and Ron had also taken a day off from their training. Even though Hermione was a Muggle-born, she had not participated in any Halloween in the Muggle world since she entered the Wizarding world 8 years ago and was quite excited to partake in her siblings' school's event. After they had acquired permission from Principal Johnson of this, Luna had no doubt they had decided to attend their siblings' classes while they were at it. The Cullens were already at the school when they arrived. They took a moment to glance over the students in the parking lot, taking in their costumes. Of the pack, Luna was the only who dressed up, as the others were uncomfortable or not knowing how productive dressing up is. They had left Teddy at the Lion's Den with Esme, who had agreed to babysit the little boy at their home instead of her place. Ginny had to be forcibly separated from her nephew, as Teddy was dressed, ironically enough, in a werewolf outfit. Harry looked at his brothers, silently asking if they were ready to face whatever troubles they would be facing with. They had taken the Escalade for themselves, leaving the Lagonda for the girls. Ron smirked mischievously. "Am I allowed to say, unobtrusively sneak a hex at anyone who talks about Davina?" Draco turned in his driver's seat, raising an eyebrow at Ron. "Unobtrusively? My, our very own wolf knows big words. Mama Griffin would be proud. Wouldn't you say so, Phoenix Blade?" Harry just shook his head as Neville chuckled. Ron glared at the blonde man. "Shut up, dragon. I doubt Fire would be happy with you when she finds out you were the one who sabotaged her last relationship." If it was possible, Draco would have passed as a ghost as the little color in his face faded with trepidation. Before he could say anything, a knock at his window startled him. He turned to see Hermione trying to look in the tinted window. Sparing one last glare at Ron, he got out, followed by the others. "Where's Davina?" Neville asked. "She's waiting in the car. She wants all of us out here before she gets out," Ginny answered. "Why is that?" Alice asked, halting to a stop in front of them, her own band of siblings behind her. "You didn't see it?" Hermione asked, a little surprised. "See what? Was I supposed to?" The pack grinned at each other, setting the Cullens on edge. Whenever the pack got that weird glint in their eyes, they knew that whatever they had cooked up would not be beneficial to anyone's health. Edward, who had eyes only for Harry, felt anxious at whatever their new friends were up to. Even though Alice had told them the pack wouldn't be dressed up, Edward had held on to the hope that he would see Harry portraying someone else. Imagine his disappointment when the green-eyed man exited his car in regular clothes. Although he shouldn't be talking, as he and his brothers and sisters refused to dress up. They all turned when the back door opened. Alice giggled, clapping enthusiastically. Rosalie smirked. Jasper's and Emmett's eyes widened when one Luna Lovegood Potter stepped out. Edward prided himself on the fact that he could act decorously even when he felt the need to hide his sister's new friend from hormonal teenage boys. "Oh Luna, you look absolutely slutty." "This would do exactly the trick," Alice giggled. Harry turned to her, surprised. "You knew what she was planning to do." "Well, of course I knew, Harry. Who do you think Luna got those clothes from?" Alice said, "although I didn't know she was going to wear it to school today, but oh well." Harry and the others shook their heads at their two unpredictable respective sisters. Harry just took Luna's left hand, leaving her other side for Ginny to take. He gave Luna a look that promised a lecture later at home before saying, "You will be with Neville and Ginny today. Anything happens to you, they will tell me, understand?" Luna shook her head. "Phoenix, I don't need bodyguards." "Like hell you don't. Luna Potter, you will keep close to Blade and fire through all your classes, because if I find that you deliberately lost them, I swear, Luna, I will hang you by your feet from the branches of the tree behind the den," Hermione ranted. Alice, Rosalie, Emmett, Edward, and Jasper looked at her, shocked. They had heard of her temper, but never, in the last 2 months, had they seen her lose it. Seems like they should heed Harry's advice and try not to anger her. After a few moments of silence where Luna looked properly chastised, they started moving towards the school. Luna had not been seen by the populace of school and wasn't to be so early in the morning as she draped an ankle-length coat around her. Neville smirked at Hermione and Harry. "Seems like your bodyguard idea won't work, Phoenix, Griffin." The group laughed as Hermione's face flushed an impressive red. There was silence in the canteen when Luna entered with her siblings and friends. They had not noticed the attention they were gathering as each were involved in their own world with each other. Hermione was chastising Luna once again as the witch had discarded her robe before approaching the cafeteria. Edward heard the pack's bloods boiling when Bella spoke in a cutting tone, not befitted her nature. "Do you see Loony, Jess? She couldn't make enough last night, so she is putting in extra hours at school," Bella sneered at the blonde witch. "I'm sure Cullen can help you with that. Don't worry, neither of you know where the other has been, so you'll get along just fine." Luna being Luna laughed along with her, her signature expression on her beautiful face. As Miss Swan jealous that she would not look good in such an outfit. She said, "And which Cullen did you mean, dear Isabella? Surely you don't mean Edward?" The question was stated in an innocent way, but the burn was just too much. The look on Bella's face was enough to make them think hell might have frozen over. Harry tensed. He could see his siblings, ready to attack at any moment's notice. Bella snapped, standing up angrily, "Look here, you little bitch. I don't have to stand on the corner to get money, nor do I need to do so to get laid. Which is why you have no money nor can you get laid. I don't have to leave my house to get such things," Luna teased, unfazed by the fury that was Bella Swan. Bella took a step forward but froze at the growl that issued from Alice and Harry. If Bella's expression earlier had been hell frozen over, the look on Harry's face was the world ending all around you in burst of flames and lightning. Nobody had to know that this was exactly what happened the last time Harry had been angry. The Death Eater's world had ended, and good riddance, Ron thought. Before anyone could say anything in defense of their sister and friend, Luna said, as calm as can be, "I have grown tired of this little game between us, Isabella. I advise you to find something better to do to take up your time, because if you keep doing as you are now, I cannot guarantee your safety. Now I'd run off like the coward you were before I do something I'll greatly regret. I don't wish to disappoint Harry, my brother, by lowering myself to dirty standards." Luna's voice had grown colder and harsher as it had been during the final battle. Ginny grinned at her sister's bravery. It was not the first time the others thought that Luna would have done well in Gryffindor. To everyone's surprise, the pack, Cullens, students, and Bella, Rosalie stepped forward. Bella gulped at the sheer look of hatred on the vampire's ethereal face. "If I can't hurt her, Isabella, neither can you," she growled. The double meaning of her words echoed around them. While it had not made sense to others, it made perfect sense to her siblings and friends, and judging from the look on Bella's face, she had caught the double meaning. Without saying anything more, she turned her back on them and walked out, leaving 12 amused people in her wake. "So, who wants candy?" Luna asked cheerfully, looking at the stunned students. You like him? Years of being an undead saved Edward from jumping in surprise. He turned to his right side, looking into a pair of blue eyes. They didn't show any emotion. Like Harry's and Draco's, Ron Weasley's eyes were dark, aloof. He didn't know what they had been through to make them dead, but from what Jasper had said, they all experienced the same thing: pain. Ron smirked at him before turning back to take in the party. It was their own little soiree, the Cullens. From what Alice had said, they had never partaken of any Halloween nonsense as they didn't have any friends to share it with, but now that they had the pack, they wouldn't go wrong with a party. So here they are, the day after the scene Luna had caused at school, with their new friends, the vampires. Ron scoffed. Who would have thought that in less than a year they would be friends with a family of vampires after fighting against some of their people at the final battle? No one, that's who. As he sat next to the mind reader, Ron felt unsure on how he was going to address the man. He wanted to make sure that his intentions would be good. He wanted to know if Edward would ever hurt his brother. He simply wanted to know everything. It was a few weeks ago that Luna had revealed the little detail of Harry being Edward's mate without Harry's presence. Of course it had worried them, what with Edward being a vampire and all, but Luna had assured them that the young vampire would never hurt their brother. Still, one can never be too safe. I don't know what you're talking about, Edward sighed. I know you know what I'm talking about, Edward. Don't play stupid. Edward glared at Ron. He didn't even bother reading his mind. He always gets a massive headache from encountering mental walls. So what if I do? Edward challenged. Ron shrugged, taking a drink from his drink. I won't do anything, and neither will my siblings. We just want you to promise you won't hurt him. And if I do? Edward almost winced when Ron turned a dark look on him. There was no trace of the laughing young man there from earlier, but a hardened man. Don't make this any harder than it already is, Edward. With that, Ron left, leaving a bewildered and confused Edward. Now what was that about? He'll have to ask Alice about this. Shrugging, he turned back to take in the young man that had so enraptured him. And who had made him very happy when Luna revealed she was his sister. Harry Potter was talking with Esme and Ginny across the yard. For once since they arrived, his son was once again in his arms. He had been passed around among the Cullens, and the witches and wizards were surprised at how at ease they all were around Teddy. Sure, the matriarch of the family had been looking after the little cub for a couple months now, but they weren't sure if she had smelled Teddy's wolf scent. Clearly, judging from the fact that she was still in love with the young boy, they were in the clear. Edward watched with a small smile on his handsome face as Harry laughed at something Esme said. Ever since the first day he saw the enigmatic young man, Edward had been rather enamored with him. Harry was shy, always preferring to hide in the shadows. He was smart, and the vampire had the pleasure one day in English of witnessing so when he had a heated debate with Mr. Min regarding the history of England. Harry was protective, fiercely so, of his family, and from what Edward has seen of the others, they all were as well. He has a kind heart and always willing to help one in need. He was loyal, courageous, and damn stubborn to boot. Edward knew that some of the people at school see him as some sort of weakling, but somehow, he knew that Harry was far from a weakling. As Edward continued to ponder his friend and contemplating his growing attraction to the human, he completely missed the sly and knowing looks his sister and Luna were sharing. If he had, he would have been running for the hills using his inhuman speed. HPEC. It was going on 2 in the morning and the pack had just gotten home from their little Halloween celebration with the Cullens. They had asked them to stay the night, of course, as it was late, but as they all had nightmares, they had thought best if they leave for their own home. His siblings had all retreated to their magically made rooms as soon as they arrived, pleading tiredness. After Harry had tucked his son into bed, he had done his nightly work of checking the wards and was currently in the kitchen, nursing a cup of British tea. He sat, wallowing in his thoughts, especially on one particular Bella Swan. From what Alice had said, Edward had a nasty break-up from Bella Swan, thus affirming his curiosity of the girl's unnatural hatred towards her ex and family. Bella was still hurting, both from her betrayal and the loss of Edward. Despite how she treats the Cullens, especially Rosalie, she still wanted to be friends with them. When he had probed her mind, he had met with nothing. It was like no one was even living up there. After a few more hardened pushing, he had made it deep inside her mind. It was quiet, everything was organized, and if Harry didn't know that she was entirely Muggle, he would have been concerned with a squib living among them. Squibs were almost as bad as magical folks in that they know everything about Harry Potter. He had told Draco and Luna this revelation, of course, and after deliberate actions where the two had come into eye contact with the girl, they had confirmed his story. Bella Swan's mind was eerily organized as an experienced wizard or witch. But regardless of this, Harry had still managed to view her life in forks from the little time he manages to catch her. He saw her parents, her relationship with Edward, her time with the Cullen family, and then the unthinkable with a Jacob Black. Further probing on his part found the young man a shapeshifter on the Quileute reservation. He had been happy at this revelation and couldn't wait to meet the pack. Anyway, he knew that Bella was a nice girl, but the way she was particularly acting was very disconcerting, especially as she seems to hate his sister. But no matter, he would thaw the girl's cold exterior and make friends, even if it kills his siblings and new friends. And of course, thinking about Bella made him think of Edward and couldn't help himself from giving a soft smile at the thought of the young vampire. Edward was everything Cedric had been, everything Harry wanted in a person. Of course this both hurt and consoled him, but nevertheless, he found in Edward what he had found in Cedric so long ago. Edward had a sense of humor, quite loyal, fiercely protective. Loving and caring, he was intelligent, sneaky, and cunning, and though this unsettled him, he found himself properly charmed by the vampire. This wasn't the way to base a relationship on, but every time the wizard would be near Edward, he got tingly all over and his heart beat faster than its normal pace. He knew it was too early to develop a crush on the man, but for the life of him, he couldn't stop thinking of him. But for the sake of his heart and his family, he would not do anything to jeopardize that. He was so deep into his thoughts that he didn't know he had company until Ron sat across from him cupping a glass of water. "A galleon for your thoughts," the redhead said. Harry smirked. "Am I that expensive?" Ron snorted in amusement. "No. But when Hermione insisted that none of us are never that cheap nor low, it changes your view on things." "That's our Griffin," Harry chuckled. Now, spill. What's on your mind?" "I saw you talking to Edward tonight," Harry said, raising an eyebrow at Ron. "Just reminding him of a few things," Ron said. "Ron," Harry started, sighing. The redhead held up a hand. "Stop it right there, Harry. I know you're not exactly happy that I approached him, but know that you are not the only one who is protective. You are more concerned with our safety rather than yours, and to tell you the truth, Harry, it's bloody annoying." Ron stood up, pacing in front of the brunette. "Harry, the way that you think of everyone first is selfless, but you have to have some kind of concern for yourself. I know it's not exactly possible with you having a son now, but really, you need to take some time for yourself. I only asked Edward to protect you and to make you won't ever be hurt." He held up a hand to stop Harry's protests. Yeah, you can take care of yourself, but still, we are worried. We've seen how Edward looks at you and we've, admired his attempts to get you alone, and we want you to be happy." Harry sent him a small smile. "I've admired his person, but Ron, it's hard for me right now to be with someone. Maybe when I'm healed enough and Teddy has grown up I will think about dating. But as for now, I have my family to keep me happy." Ron sighed. "All right, but just remember, we are here for you. There's no need for you to keep everything bottled up. Dragon and I might tease you, but we'll support you." He smirked at Harry, who said, all right. You made your point. Now, I think it's time for bed, I'm beat." The two brothers walked out and up to their respective rooms. HPEC. Not more has been talked about since that Halloween night. 3 months had passed and the members of the pack were busy with their own lives and careers. Ginny was having fun in Egypt. Neville had finished his herbology apprenticeship with Professor Sprout and had taken the position after Christmas break. Ron was steadily doing well in his Auror training and has until June to finish his training and would be assigned his first field assignment, Hermione herself was doing well teaching defense. As for the three that lives in Forks, things had gotten considerably well between them and the students. Luna was slowly but surely worming her way through the students' defenses, and while Draco and Harry were still concerned for her, they had to admit it was nice to see that she was getting friends outside of Rosalie and Alice. The Cullens still didn't know of the pack's secret, and Harry and the gang held a council that they would have to reveal themselves soon. Considering that Harry was Edward's mate and the latter was increasingly getting annoyed at the lack of intimacy between him and Harry, they thought it best to lay it all out in the open before anything happens. And thus, it came to pass that they were all sitting in the Lion's Den's living room on the second Saturday of January. 15 people sat wherever they found available for seating, with the exception of one in the arms of his Uncle Ron. Harry turned to Hermione, silently begging her to take charge. From where he sat in front of the fireplace, Draco rolled his eyes at his brother's inability to speak in front of crowds. He opened his mouth to reprimand him when Ginny, who was sitting next to him on the conjured sofa, pinched him. He glared at her, hissing, "What?" She glared right back at him. "Don't you dare say something embarrassing to Phoenix, Dragon. And what makes you think I'll do something to embarrass him? That's Phoenix's and Wolf's specialty all on their own," Draco said, unaware they were the center of attention. Ron protested from his seat next to Hermione. "Fire. Did Dragon ever mention to you what happened to your last boyfriend?" Ron smirked at Draco, who had gone pale. Ginny said in a menacing voice, "What did you do, Dragon?" Draco took a big gulp of breath, looking at the scary look on his sister's face, completely blocking the sounds of giggling and chuckles from around them. "Well, see, I didn't do anything, per se. It's just that, well, I didn't do anything, really." Neville choked on his laughter to see the sophisticated Draco Malfoy stutter his way through survival. Of course he couldn't blame the guy, seeing as when one of the girls was angry, they were scary as hell. Ginny took second place down from Hermione. "Do you mean to tell me that after 6 months of dating, Adam suddenly turned around and disappeared from the face of the earth, with no reason whatsoever?" Ginny shrieked. "Yes, exactly what happened," Draco exclaimed triumphantly. "Glad Ginny could see things my way," he thought, relieved. His relief came to an abrupt halt when Ginny whacked him on the head, yelling, "Draconis Lucius Malfoy, you are a complete and utter git. When our guests leave, you and I will be talking." "Yes, Ginny," Draco sighed to his fate of death. He glared at Ron, who was laughing his head off, barely able to keep his nephew on his lap. The others just rolled their eyes at Draco's predicament while the Cullens looked bemused. Emmett, after recovering from his bout of laughter, questioned them, "Why do you guys do that?" Luna said, "Do what, Emmett?" "Well, you guys call each other 2 different names, sometimes even more so with the strange names." "I mean, they all sound cool, but I'm just confused," Emmett said. The pack turned to each other. This was the moment of truth. Harry looked at Carlisle and Esme sitting on a sofa across from him, Hermione, and Ron. He took a deep breath to calm his nerves, trying his best to ignore the inquisitive glances from Edward and his siblings. Alice, he had no doubt, had already foreseen this moment but wasn't sure on that development. She had admitted that when it came to them, their futures weren't definite. "Do you know anything of a magical world?" Carlisle was surprised. This wasn't the kind of question he had expected from any of his children's friends. Sure, he knows of the wizarding world from his short trip to England after his family was completed. He didn't know much, yes, but he knew enough to know that wizards and witches lived among the rest of the world. He looked at his family and found them looking at Harry, confused. The only ones different than they were the shapeshifters in the reservoir. Carlisle once again turned to Harry. "I know there is a wizarding world around the globe, but I don't see why that is relevant to us." Harry tried one last time to beg Hermione for help but was denied once again. He groaned and, looking in Carlisle's golden orbs, said, "Do you keep up with their activities and such?" Now the elder was confused. Why exactly was Harry asking these questions? He decided to humor the boy. "I know there was a war in the light side, as I've heard, has one. I also know that there were vampires involved." Neville straightened. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see his siblings tense up. "How do you know of that?" he said in harsh tone. Jasper took a shattering breath, assaulted as he was with intense feelings of rage, worry, concern, and hatred. Alice slipped an arm around his waist, trying to comfort him. Edward stepped forward from where he was leaning against a window that overlooked the Phoenix Fountain. "That's none of your business. What do you guys want?" Esme said, looking at her eldest son. "Please, Edward, calm down. I'm sure they have a reason for asking these questions. And I'm sure you have a reason on knowing there were vampires involved," Draco said sharply. "Now see here, Blondie, your brother has no right to talk to my father in that tone," Rosalie snapped at Draco. "And neither do you have the right to talk like that to my mother. Call me Blondie one more time and I will." Ginny had successfully placed her hand over Draco's mouth. Harry glared at him. "Shut up, dragon. We're not fighting here." Harry turned to the Cullens. "I'm sorry for Draco's and Neville's reactions, but we just want to know how you know that there were vampires involved." Carlisle conferred silently with his wife, not needing words to converse. They both consulted their children, ignoring Rosalie's and Edward's scowls at the pack. After finishing their silent conversations, Carlisle turned to Harry. "Can we trust you with our secret?" he asked. Before Harry could answer, Ron said, Yes, you can trust us. Besides, we've known you were vampires since we first met your kids at school and we haven't tried to kill you once or ousted you. That should count as a reason to trust us." The Cullens froze. Even Rosalie's eyes widened in disbelief. There were a few moments of silence where the two sets of families eyed each other warily. Teddy, from the lap of Uncle Ron, took in the scene in front of him. He thought the pale people looked funny with wide eyes. Edward finally broke the silence. He said, in a shaky voice, "How did you know?" Rosalie spoke up. "Swan told you, didn't she? She thought she'd scare you guys away, so she told our secret." Hermione held up a hand. No, Isabella Swan didn't tell us anything, and how we knew is why we invited you guys here. If we could all please calm down, we'll tell you why." She waited until the Cullens, especially Edward and Rosalie, didn't look so murderous anymore before continuing. "When I first saw you guys in the cafeteria, I knew there was something off about you. You were too pale to be healthy and your hands were too cold, even for this weather. I knew what you were, but I didn't dare to believe that you were living among my brother and nephew. It wasn't until Draco drew me and Harry aside that he confirmed my suspicions." Alice asked, "Why didn't you ever let us know you knew what we are?" "Because it wasn't our secret to tell," Harry jumped in. "I asked the others, I begged Draco, to not reveal what we know. Your eyes are golden, which means you do not feed on humans, and as long as that knowledge remains true, I won't move my family away from here or kill you." "Kill us?" Rosalie scoffed. "You can't kill a vampire." "I wouldn't be too sure of that," Ginny said, eyebrow raised at Rosalie. "What do you mean?" Esme asked, clutching her husband's hand. "It means we killed vampires before, Mrs. Cullen. And we will do it again if they are a danger to us," Neville quietly said. "How?" Emmett demanded. He had gotten rigid with every word spoken from the strangers in front of them. "We're wizards and witches," Luna said. Silence ensued. "But that's impossible, Carlisle. They're lying, aren't they?" Edward demanded. Carlisle sighed, turning to his seer of a daughter. She nodded. "I knew when Harry moved here with Teddy, but like them, I didn't tell because it wasn't my secret to tell." Rosalie stood up in anger. "Don't tell me you're buying any of this." "I wish I could, but I'm afraid it's true, Rosalie," Carlisle said. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you the extent of my knowledge of the magical world, but I thought we won't ever be discovered by them. But it looks like we have been discovered by them." Esme turned to the siblings in front of her. They had stayed silent while Rosalie and Edward disputed with their father. There was nothing on their faces that says they were joking, and from what she had made up of them and from the time she spent with each and every one of them, they weren't the sort to make up stories for their own pleasures. She had accepted the fact that their secret was out, but she only wanted to know one thing. Well, actually, two things. If you knew of our nature, why did you trust me with your son's safety? I would have thought you would ask someone else, Esme said. Harry shrugged. I didn't trust anyone around town, and Teddy's situation is sensitive. I didn't trust you either at first, and Alice knew of this, which was why she had us meet at your home. You remind me a lot of my surrogate mother, and that was enough for me. And like I said, your eyes suggested you don't drink human blood, so that was a plus." Esme smiled at him. The boy had taken a huge risk placing his son in the care of a vampire, and yet, he trusted her. "All right, I have one more question." Harry nodded his head in assent. "Why does he smell different?" "No matter what I do, he always had a distinctive smell around him." Harry looked at the others. Hermione said, "First, I want to know if you accept that we are witches and wizards. Then we'll answer your question, Mrs. Cullen, and any other you wish to ask us." "I think I speak for all of us by saying that I want proof," Jasper said. He had recovered slightly from the attack of emotions from all around him, not to mention his mind was still reeling with the fact that wizards were real. Draco rolled his eyes. He drew his wand from his wrist holder and, pointing it at the coffee table, cried, "Wingardium Leviosa." The vampires' eyes widened when the table floated in front of them. When Draco leveled the table back on the ground, Neville held out his hands, and calling his special magic to him, managed to produce a rose from his hands. If anything, the vampires were even more stunned to see the evidence in front of them. Ginny took out her wand and cried, "Accio Rose." The rose flew straight and true to her grasp. Hermione conjured a vase and, setting it on the table, murmured, "Aguamenti." The vase filled with water, then Ginny placed the rose inside. Harry and Ron rolled their eyes at their siblings. Meanwhile, the Cullens had watched the whole thing with amazement, and whether they liked it or not, they had to concede that the pack was telling the truth. "All right, you managed to convince us," Edward consented. "Why does Teddy have a particular smell?" Harry sighed. "I know your relationship with the pack at the reservoir isn't the very best, and I know all too well your feud with werewolves, and so I ask you to not treat my son in a prejudicial way," he said. Seeing that Rosalie was trying to speak, Ron snapped at her, handing Teddy to Hermione. "For Merlin's sake, will you please try and listen? I've had just about enough of you and your arrogance and your 'I'm beautiful so bow to me' ways, Rosalie, and I'm at the end of my patience. So either shut up and let Harry talk or get out. Either way will make me happy." Rosalie, along with her family, gaped at Ron. It was the first time he had ever outright disrespected a lady, and to be honest, it unnerved them, especially when he practically glowed in his anger. Hermione passed Teddy to Harry, then softly but firmly tried to calm her boyfriend down. She tugged him down to his seat and proceeded to rub his back to relax him. Draco smirked from his perch on his couch while Ginny looked at her brother, concerned. Harry looked at Rosalie. "Please try to refrain yourselves from speaking until I'm done," he said. Seeing the nods from Carlisle and Esme, he continued, "Like I said, if you don't accept my son the way he is, I'm going to have to take him away from you, Mrs. Cullen. My son's father, one of my honorary godfathers, was a werewolf." Alice and Esme gasped. Carlisle, Rosalie, Emmett, Jasper, and Edward's faces tightened with dislike. "Unlike the shapeshifters down in the reservoir, my godfather was a real werewolf. He only changes on the full moon. You might consider him the alpha of the pack. He was subjected to hatred and prejudice from the majority of our world, and it killed him. He convinced himself he was a monster, but he was far from that. He was the kindest and most loving man I had ever known, and I was happy that he was in my life and that he gave me a son. He was afraid of loving and hurting himself in the process, and was even more terrified that any children he might have would inherit his lycanthropy. I have had Teddy tested for lycanthropy, and fortunately, he didn't inherit it. But we believe he will inherit the attributes of a werewolf, and we won't know for sure until he's at least 3 years old before testing his aura. It doesn't matter to me whether he was to become a werewolf or not. Teddy is my son, and I will always support and love him no matter what. If you don't think you can be in the presence of the child of an alpha, I would ask you to leave now and forget any of this took place." There was silence. Edward studied Harry and saw that the boy was telling the truth. He noticed how tightly he was holding his son, and though it would have hurt any 9-month-old baby, Teddy seemed content to be in his father's arms. Edward heard the thoughts of his family regarding this new information. They were surprised that they had a cub in their own home for months but never figured it out. He knew that his mother would, regardless of Teddy's situation, would still continue to watch him while Harry and his siblings were at school. Carlisle and Alice would be accepting. After all, the seer was too much attached to Teddy to let him go. Rosalie, of course, was angry that they had been exposed all this time but never knew it, angry that she deeply loved the baby of a werewolf, their enemy, angry that she couldn't remain angry at all because she knew that like them, the pack have secrets of their own and exposing it would call attention to them. She chanced to look at her husband and saw that he was far more accepting than she expected. Jasper was too busy trying to calm everyone down that he couldn't think for himself. But he knew from the time he spent in their presence that he could trust the pack. They were his friends and he would protect them with everything he's got. The pack stayed silent, letting the Cullens register what they had been told. If worse comes to pass, they would obliviate the whole lot of them and go on like before. But they hope it wouldn't come to that. A few minutes passed and finally, Carlisle spoke. "I'm honored that you trust us enough to tell us this, Harry. As ours was with you, you have our word no one would hear of this." Harry sighed in relief. "Thank you, sir. I really appreciate it." "You'll be visiting the pack at the reservoir," Alice stated. Neville nodded. "We were planning the trip for tomorrow. Even if Teddy won't be a werewolf, we want him to associate with wolves. It is part of his heritage. Yes, and please, whatever comments you have about them, keep them to yourselves. We don't want to estrange from the wolves," Luna said. Everyone looked at each other. They were in agreement and they would still be friends, and they know that if anything happens, Harry and his family would leave without looking back. They all took a moment to ponder the events of what just happened before the silence broke again. "So, what about those nicknames?" Emmett asked. Harry and his siblings laughed. Hermione said, "Well, you all know our names. You see, in the wizarding world, some wizards and witches can turn into animals at will. Not just any animal, mind you, but one that has been chosen for you. It's called Animagus and all of us are Animagi. However, not all of us are named after our Animagus forms. For example, Neville's name is Blade after his skill with a sword, but his animal form is a black panther. Ginny's skill is with fire, thus the name, but her form is that of a lioness. Luna is Divina for her seer abilities, her form is a snow leopard. Draco's name is Dragon, the translation of the name, his form is a jaguar. Although Ron, Harry, and I are named exactly after our forms, the others are not, but their nicknames are the ones with which we call them, in or out of their forms. We're pretty much part of the majestic animals of the kingdom." Quote. "Wow," Alice breathed with amazement. "You can really turn into animals?" Esme asked, eyes wide. Ron and Draco smirked at each other. "You want to see?" Emmett cried, "Of course I want to see." Luna and Ginny laughed at his enthusiasm. Ron and Draco jumped off the couch and soon, instead of the two young wizards standing in the room, there was a gray wolf and a jaguar. The Cullens were thinking they were lucky they were already dead, or they would be in the morgue right now due to a heart attack. Teddy giggled and petted Wolf. Everyone started laughing at the delighted look on his face as he stroked Wolf. The Cullens came out of their stupor long enough to admire the beautiful animals before them. They were all enjoying themselves, especially when Ginny changed into her form to join her brothers when Teddy said his first word. He was pointing at fire, giggling, when he said the one word that managed to bring tears to Harry's eyes. "Dada, Dada." All movement stopped and stared at Teddy in amazement. The little one looked up at his father, crying, "Dada." Harry laughed. He stood up, jumping around, dancing with his son, elated at his cub's first word. "He called me Dada. My own. Ron, did you hear him? He called me Dada. Oh, my boy is so smart," Harry cried, dancing around the room, oblivious to his family and friends' laughter. Alice, Luna, and Ginny grinned at the happy father. "Congratulations, Daddy." Harry grinned at them, his chortling son in his arms. "Thank you. Isn't he a bit young, though?" Draco shook his head, amused. "Come on, Phoenix, we all know Teddy is a smart kid." "Takes after his daddy then," Harry laughed, dotting his son on the forehead. Hermione and Neville exclaimed, "God help us all." "Hey!" Laughter rang throughout the lion's den as Harry was teased mercilessly as Teddy kept crying his new word. Everything was all right with the world for now. They all knew there would be some kind of obstacles in the near future, but for now, they were going to enjoy their time together. HPECHPECHPECHPECHPECHPECHPECHPEC. If anything, the relationship between the two families was stronger than before. It also eased the two Sears' minds when Harry finally and slowly let in Edward. Harry's feelings towards Edward were slowly progressing into what he had once had for Cedric, but he had acknowledged that while Edward bore his late lover's face, he was someone entirely different. Teddy was babbling more and the only word they could make out was, "Yup, you guessed it, Dada." Harry couldn't have been more proud. It was the second week of February that things became tense. Somehow Draco had done a very stupid thing without asking Harry's permission first, and as the result of said very stupid thing, he was running around the forest surrounding Lion's Den in his form, afraid of going into the house. Forks High was holding a talent show that Friday to conclude Valentine's Day. It didn't have to be anything about Valentine's, but if you got something, show up at auditions and you just might get in. Draco, in all his stupidity and ignorance, had signed himself up, and Harry. When he had told Harry the great news, the young father didn't take it so well, but as there had been no other way, he had agreed. This was why he was now standing on stage in the gym, in front of practically the whole town, his traveling siblings, and the Cullens, ready to demonstrate his talent. Dragon was so dead. Harry Potter had faced countless of dark wizards with the mad, egotistical Voldemort to top the cake. He has also faced dragons, basilisks, acromantulas, mermaids, and countless other wonders are not so much of the wizarding world. But this just scares the heck out of him. He had never been much of a social person. He never liked crowded places or speaking in front of an audience. Heck, even the wizarding press had trouble getting a hold of him for an interview or some such nonsense. He preferred to have Hermione or Luna speak on his behalf. But this time, he can't have either girl to take his place because he was about to sing to a crowd of muggles. When Draco had approached him earlier in the week to announce that he had signed Harry up for the school talent show, the green-eyed wizard had come very close to hexing his blonde-haired brother. Unfortunately, Luna had intercepted his spell before it could hit Draco. Therefore, Harry had been in a bad mood the whole week. Standing now, on the stage, facing his family, friends, schoolmates, teachers, and the townsfolk, Harry felt his confidence slipping away. He had thought the talent show would be only a school affair, but he guessed he couldn't blame the principal for inviting the whole town to the event, as hardly anything happens in Forks. Seeing so many people looking up at him made him nervous and wanted nothing more than to disappear from sight. He looked to his left, wondering if he could make it across the stage and to the parking lot in record time. Then he looked back at his family whom had dropped their own errands and such to come watch him perform. Luna had wasted no time in getting their brothers and sisters to come to the event. She had even invited Mr. and Mrs. Weasley, and the twins, Bill, Fleur, and Charlie had been unable to make it. Harry took a deep breath before settling on the stool that had been set up by the school council for use. He held his guitar closer as if it was his lifeline. He once more looked at his family, sitting with the Cullen clan. Not to his surprise, Teddy was sitting comfortably on Edward's lap. In the months following the revelations of both families, Teddy and Edward had grown close. Harry had had doubts about the budding relationship as he was still uncertain of his growing feelings for Edward, but he was slowly coming around. He focuses his attention once more on the audience. He looked around and through them, not really seeing any of them. But he felt compelled to say something before singing. He cleared his throat. "Hi," he said. "My name is Harry Potter and I will be singing for you tonight." Sarah McLachlan sang this song, "Hold On," and when I heard it a few years ago, I couldn't let go of the words. Harry sent them a small smile. "I think my family knows who I am singing this song for. I hope you like it." He started the first notes and was soon losing himself in the melody of his guitar. He sang, hold on to yourself, for this is gonna hurt like hell. Hold on to yourself, you know that only time will tell. What is it in me that refuses to believe? This isn't easier than the real thing. My love, you know that you're my best friend. You know I'd do anything for you. My love, let nothing come between us. My love for you is strong and true. Harry let the words course through his being, warming and caressing his heart with the heartfelt words. He had been powerful enough to defeat Voldemort but not enough to save his love. It had broken his heart at the thought of never having enough strength to save the one person who had stolen his heart. Am I in heaven here or am I? At the crossroads I am standing. So now you're sleeping peaceful. I lie awake and pray that you'll be strong tomorrow and we'll see another day and we will praise it. And love the light that brings a smile across your face. Oh God, if you're out there, won't you hear me? I know that we've never talked before. Oh God, the man I love is leaving. Won't you take him when he comes to your door? He could clearly remember that summer after the disastrous 5th year when Hermione took him to her church when she found out he had never attended one in his life. He had asked her if Cedric was in heaven with God and his parents. She had replied that yes, Cedric was in heaven with God, his parents and Sirius. He had then said that he doesn't know if he should believe her. After all, God didn't answer his prayers to keep Cedric safe. He remembered listening to his sisters crying at his words. Am I in heaven here or am I in hell? At the crossroads I am standing. So now you're sleeping peaceful. I lie awake and pray that you'll be strong tomorrow and we'll see another day and we will praise it. And love the light that brings a smile across your face. Hold on to yourself, for this is gonna hurt like hell. Harry trailed off the last note. He opened his eyes at the cheers and applause and looked up at his family, gazing up at him proudly albeit sadly. He sent them a small smile. His gaze seemingly found themselves upon Edward's. The vampire stared right back in his eyes, never letting go of the little boy in his arms. He schooled his features when he clearly saw the pain in Harry's eyes. When Harry had appeared on stage with a guitar, he was surprised. When Harry started playing, he was amazed. When Harry started singing, he was mesmerized. The way Harry had sang, Edward could feel the emotions rolling off of the words, shaping them exactly into a picture of perfect pain that he could see. He once again wished that he could hold and comfort the young wizard in his arms and erase his pain. But there was always something in Harry's eyes that begged for him to stay away. And Edward couldn't help but hope that one day, Harry Potter might let him in to ease the pain and make him happy. Back on the stage, Harry just stared at the seemingly joyous crowd. It was only when Angela Weber appeared at his side that he remembered where he was. He walked off the stage to the continuing sound of applause. Edward ran through the forest, hunting for prey. It had been a week since the talent show and a week since Harry once again avoided or ignored him. It was all Edward could do to stop himself from taking the young man and claim him as his own. They were back at square one and the vampire felt despaired at the thought that he would never be with his mate. He slowed down, letting his family run ahead. He had a lot on his mind and it was all because of Harry James Potter. For once in his life, Edward Cullen was honestly lost. With Isabella, he had always accepted the way things went, embraced the feelings of content and play. He never had trouble keeping up with her. Even when he couldn't read her mind, he seemed to know what she was thinking just by the look in her eyes. He welcomed the atmosphere she wrought when she came into his life. But with Harry, it was an entirely different story. Harry brought feelings of stormy ravages and brought his blood to sing with life. Harry made his dead heart beat with the rhythm of the Fury Sea. Harry brought an air of pure, unadulterated life and he seemed to shine with its light and Edward simply reveled in it. Harry made Edward lose control and he made Edward feel like he was the only man ever to walk on Earth. With Harry, Edward Cullen felt unconditional love and the promise of eternity seemed welcoming with Harry Potter at his side. But Harry had been ignoring him and Edward clearly could see the darkness on the path of eternity if things would continue to go on as it is. Edward needed help and he knew just the right person. No. Edward was taken aback. But, I said no, Edward. Harry will come to you when he's ready. Until then, you need to be patient, Luna said. Edward had left home early the next morning to pick up Luna. He had called her last night, asking if he could pick her up for school so they could talk. He had thought Luna would help him in making Harry fall in love with him but apparently not. He won't even talk to me, let alone look at me, Luna, Edward groaned. From the look of things, he won't ever be ready. Luna just looked at him sadly. Have faith, Edward. Harry will come around. He will tell you some things, but until then, as I've said, you'll have to wait for him. If you truly love Harry the way you claim you do, then you will wait. Edward sighed, dropping his head on the steering wheel. Luna laid a comforting hand on his back. She said, Harry had been through a lot, Edward, and it would take him a long time to give his heart and trust to another. Edward opened his mouth to contradict her, but she continued on. Yes, I know, he loves and trusts us, his family, but I'm talking of the kind of love that you give to someone to hold and guard. The kind of love that you trust will hold you and be with you as long as you both shall live. Harry had already gained and lost that love, Edward, and it will take him a lot of work to love like that again. You need him and he needs you, but Harry needs the time to listen to his heart and soul. Edward turned in Luna's arms, allowing her to comfort him. She herself was lost, but she also knew that Harry would need to help himself in order to accept Edward. Give him time, Edward. He will come to you, Luna whispered. Edward had followed Luna's advice. It wasn't easy, but he was willing to wait for his mate. 2 weeks later, Edward and his family walked in on what would always be the most painful experiences in his life. It was their family night with the Potter Malfoy family, and it was the Lion's Den's turn to host their weekly dinner and blood pops. What was to be a night of fun didn't turn out to be. They hadn't bothered to knock on the front door as they were the only visitors to the Lion's Den, so they had just walked in. It was a mistake. Luna and Draco were obviously in the kitchen making dinner, judging from the screaming and bangs, and Teddy was crawling across the front hall towards them. But that wasn't what caught their attention. Harry was standing by the fireplace talking softly to one Jacob Black. That would have been fine and dandy, except that the wizard was wrapped in the wolf's arms, whom had nuzzled his nose in Harry's neck. Edward felt sick. It was happening all over again. It seemed like Black was destined to steal the ones he loved. Beside him, Rosalie, Emmett, and Jasper growled in fury. This caught Harry's attention. He whipped his head around at them, eyes widening behind his glasses. He looked surprised, but when his eyes immediately sought out Edward's, the vampire could see the look of shame and defiance in the emerald greens. Edward, I can explain, Harry started. For reasons unknown, though he felt a part of him knew, he felt compelled to explain things before it got out of proportions. He was never given a chance. Edward turned and ran. Harry didn't waste any time running after Edward. Twisting himself out of Jacob's embrace, he turned into one of his animagus forms, a grey wolf, hoping it would help him catch Edward faster than his human self. He ran past the stunned Cullens, who had never seen Harry in any of his animal forms. As he disappeared outside, the Cullens turned to find Luna and Draco holding them. At one point, Teddy was safely ensconced in Jacob's arms. What happened? Draco snarled at the vampires. Rosalie growled in retaliation. Your brother is a piece of work, isn't he? Rosalie, please, Alice attempted to get through her almost feral sister. Shut up, Alice, Rosalie snapped. You knew this would happen, didn't you? And yet, you led us here. No, I didn't know. I didn't see anything, the petite vampire cried. Luna said in her dreamy voice. Why don't we all take a seat? Edward and Harry need to talk things out, so it'll be a time before they come back. Emmett, so furious at the pain his brother was going through, lunged at Luna without thought. He wanted to kill someone, and the witch's words had signed her death certificate. The brute vampire flew back against Jasper, sending them both on the floor. Esme and Carlisle turned in horror to see Draco practically glowing with his magic, wand pointed unyielding at the group. I could kill you with 2 words, Cullen. I could burn you into ashes with 1 word, Cullen. You tried to kill my sister, Cullen, and that is an offense I will not take. Incendi. Draco. No. Luna easily intercepted the deadly, for a vampire, spell, casting a shield around the vampires at the same time. The shield absorbed the spell. Luna glared at Draco, panting heavily at the excessive use of her magic. Draco, please, calm down. Please, she pleaded with the furious bee. Owned. Draco turned glowing eyes at her. He tried to kill you, he said in a low, deadly voice. I know, Dragon, but please, you have to calm down. Teddy is getting scared. This seemed to do the trick. Teddy was looking at Draco with wide eyes, clutching Jacob's shirt in his tiny hands. Unca. ACO. The wizard shut his eyes, tamping down his magic and anger. To show violence in front of his nephew was unforgivable, to try to kill someone in front of him was horrifying. He stalked forward, taking Teddy from Jacob, holding him tight. Everything's all right, cub. Everything will be fine. I'm sorry, he kept whispering. Jacob looked between Draco, Luna, and the Cullens, as if to search for something to say. He was lost and scared. The vampires had never threatened or hurt him directly even after the debacle with Bella, and he didn't know what was happening with Harry and Edward, but he knew one thing. If he wanted to live to see his next birthday, he needed to get out of the house as fast as he can. He treaded cautiously towards Luna. Luna, I think it's time for me to leave. Tell Harry all. He didn't get to finish his sentence as Emmett, Rosalie, and Jasper growled at him. Before he could retaliate, Luna snapped at the three vampires. Silence. There was power behind the command and the three angry vampires fell silent without another word. She turned back to Jacob. You will stay here. This is my house and no one, not a wolf or a vampire, has a say in who visits. Sit, all of you. She turned her glare on the Cullens. After a few words from Esme, Carlisle, and Alice, the other three moved towards the living area, sitting as far away from Draco and Jacob as possible. They were still protected by Luna's shield. Now, who wants tea and blood pops? Luna asked in a no-nonsense tone. Harry ran through his wards and into the forest, weaving his way around the trees. He could sense Edward up ahead of him, and using a smidgen of his magic, sped forward to catch the vampire. Edward heard a growl behind him. He slowed down, turning, but soon found himself rolling on the ground with a wolf. He snarled, a wolf on their territory. He jumped up, pulling himself in a fighting stance. The wolf slowly got on all fours. Edward momentarily faltered as the gray wolf drilled emerald green eyes into his own golden ones. Before he could attack, Harry appeared in the wolf's place. Instead of attacking him, Edward turned to run. He didn't get far before he was once again tackled to the ground. Get off of me, Potter. He growled up at the wizard. Hurt, Harry could only stare into Edward's face. Slowly, he raised himself off of him, backing away from the angry young man. He said, in a low voice, I just wanted to explain what happened back there, Edward. Edward jumped to his feet. I don't think words are needed to explain exactly what happened, Potter, he snapped. He turned to leave when Harry's softly voiced words reached his ears. I think you want me to explain, Edward. Otherwise, you wouldn't have run out like a jilted lover. He froze. He turned, glaring at Harry. Don't assume anything, Potter. Says the hypocrite, Cullen. Harry looked up, catching Edward's chilling gaze. He resisted the urge to shiver at the pain and anger clearly on the chiseled face. He sighed, rubbing his face in a tired manner. We should talk. Then talk, Edward snapped. I doubt there's nothing I haven't heard before. You're being a right bloody prat, you know that. Harry yelled. How am I supposed to act when I found you with black wrapped around each other? Edward yelled back. Nothing. All right, I don't even know why you're acting like this, Edward. Edward turned. You're a smart guy, Potter. Figure it out. Harry leapt forward, grabbing hold of the immortal's arm. No, you're not running away again. The vampire spun around, letting Harry's hand fall off. I think I have the right to do what I want, Potter. Fine, run. Run as far as you can because that's what you're good at, isn't it, Edward? Harry taunted, pushing the immortal, an unnecessary act as he barely moved an inch. That's the one thing you'll ever be good at is running. You know nothing, Edward snarled, eyes flashing with hatred. I know you've been waiting for me and now that you have me at your mercy, you're running, Harry said. They both glared at each other, willing the other to eat his words. After a moment, Harry sighed, turning his back on Edward. He walked over to a tree, sitting down against it. Jacob is my family, Edward. He didn't even look up to see if Edward was still there, but he knew that the vampire had heard him. Jacob is part of my pack, just like Alice is an honorary member. He and I, were not together. Silence ensued. Then, a quiet whisper, You didn't look like family earlier. Harry offered a wry chuckle. Jacob just received his inheritance. It's in his wolf nature to search for his pack. What do you mean? Harry heard Edward settled not far from him. Jacob just turned 17. They receive their inheritances at that age. Why did he seek you out? Harry sighed. Because, in my own pack, I am considered to be the leader. I have always protected my family. I've searched for ways to make them safe. In a wolf pack, I am considered an alpha. It didn't help that my honorary godfather, Teddy's biological father, was an alpha. To care for an alpha's child, I am regarded as the second to the alpha male. Jacob is my wolf brother, Edward, nothing more. You have to believe me. I believe you, Harry, but I just don't trust Black, Edward sighed. I know, Harry whispered. I saw what he did to you with Isabella. I'm sorry. It wasn't your fault. Does he have feelings for her? Edward asked in a weary tone. Harry winced. No, he said it was a one-time thing. Edward looked away. He supposed it doesn't make a difference whether Isabella and Jacob had feelings for each other when they did the unthinkable. It was over and done with, but with everything that just happened today, the pain rose afresh in his heart. Harry was lost in his own world. It's been months now since he had known Edward. Years since his heart started beating erratically the way it did with Cedric. He trusted the immortal, he really did, but with his heart, he did not know. He didn't want to experience the same pain he did with Cedric. He didn't want to love only to have that end tragically. Edward was a trustworthy, protective, loyal man, and Harry was honored to have him as a friend, but as a lover, he was terrified. There was also the problem with Edward being a vampire. That would be a tough hurdle to overcome, and it wouldn't be an easy decision to make. Hermione, Luna, and Ginny had all encouraged him to talk with him, to learn more about the vampire. He wanted to talk with him, he really did, but he didn't know if he could handle the pain the conversation would dredge up. Looking over at the man in question, he made his decision right then and there. I was 14 when I lost him, he started, looking off into space. Edward startled at his voice. We met the summer before my 4th year, when Ron's father took us to the World Quidditch game. He was beautiful, intelligent, and funny. Unfortunately, we didn't spend as much time together at the cup as I'd have liked, but we made up for it at school. He was 17 at the time. Harry smiled as he lost himself in his memories. For weeks all I wanted was a chance to see him, be with him. But we were in different years and we ran in different groups. Then my pseudo-grandfather announced the arrival of 2 foreign schools for the Tri-Wizard tournament, and everyone was occupied with the preparations for the schools. Seemed like there were more to do than ever before, you know. Then I saw him, in the Great Hall, when he came to put his name in the cup. I couldn't take my eyes off of him. He was surrounded by his friends, but the only one I could see was him. My mind was focused solely on him. Even though one of my housemates had entered her name, I couldn't help but hope that Cedric would be Hogwarts champion. He was. Edward kept his head down, heavy and downtrodden, with the love clearly in Harry's voice. Then another champion overshadowed his entrance, Harry continued in a bitter voice. Cedric told me later that entering the tournament was his way of making his parents proud of him. Sure, he had good grades and all, but he wanted to succeed at something that his parents hadn't attempted. But when someone from Hogwarts had his name called, Cedric was forced to share the spotlight. He didn't have a problem with it, he once said, but the school thought the second champion wanted the extra attention. He wasn't even of age to compete, but it didn't matter. Anyway, Cedric's first task was to battle a dragon for a golden egg. I was scared, terrified out of my mind at the thought of him facing such a beast. He survived and won 3rd place. Later that night, on my illegal nightly strolls around the castle, I met him in the Ollery. He asked me out that night. Harry grinned. He was stumbling over his words, blushing all the while. Of course, I wasn't to talk as I felt my face on fire the whole time. Silence stretched between them. Edward had given up trying to avert his eyes from Harry and was looking wistfully upon the joyful look on Harry's face. We snuck around our friends, never letting on with our relationship in public. Only Hermione and Ron knew of it at the beginning. Draco, Ginny, Neville, and Luna found out a year later. Harry fell silent. There was a pained look on his face. That year, my 4th year, didn't end well. Cedric had won the tournament with his fellow schoolmate champion, but he didn't escape alive. Edward's eyes widened. Harry. Harry shook his head, leveling tear-filled eyes on him. He smiled shakily. I was the other champion, Edward, he said. Edward swallowed past the dry lump in his throat. I was the other champion. I may be the one who unwillingly stole Cedric's thunder, but I was the one who stole his heart with mine own. I prayed the whole year to keep him safe, but at the end, it was my own fault that he died. I wanted him to win, to grab the cup himself, but he didn't want to. He said I earned it. I knew he deserved it. But he wouldn't just leave, so I suggested we take the cup together. Harry choked back the tears that had risen. His voice cracked as he continued. We ended up at a cemetery. Within seconds of arriving, he was ordered to be killed. The man who betrayed my parents took him from me. It was an ambush and I barely escaped with my life. I took Cedric back with me. Harry looked up at Edward. His father kept screaming, yelling for Cedric to wake up. I hated myself for causing him pain. His only son dead because I couldn't just take the bloody cup when he wanted me to. If I had just listened, he would still be alive. I hated you from the start, you know, Harry admitted. Edward jerked in surprise. You looked so much like Cedric that I just wanted you to disappear, never to show your face again. I couldn't look at you without seeing Ced's warm and loving eyes. I just couldn't. Swallowing his own pain, Edward slowly stood up, making his way towards the crying wizard. He knelt in front of him, taking Harry's face in his cold hands. He gently raised the tear-stained face upwards. He looked down into the emerald eyes. He softly said, in a voice that bespoke the love he felt for the young wizard, "You are an amazing young man, Harry. And if I have to hazard a guess, I'd say Cedric wouldn't want you to beat yourself over his death." Harry offered a watery smile. "I'm sorry, Edward. I'm really sorry," he cried. "For what?" Edward whispered. "I have you in my arms." With that simple statement, Harry James Potter leaned up to take what was to be his future. A Muggle named Gandhi once said, "Live as if you were to die tomorrow. Learn as if you were to live forever." I never understood that saying when I was a young child. It was only when I met them that I finally understood the long-forgotten words of wisdom. But it was when I was with him that I finally felt the true word of living. I was an only child. But I would be lying if I said it wasn't lonely. Every other kid would have relished being an only child, but I wasn't like every other child. I may have had my parents all to myself, but there were times when I would be in desperate need of someone of my own age. I wanted someone to play with me, someone to talk to about magic, just someone that weren't my parents. I loved my parents, I still do. It was somewhat of a life goal for me to make them proud. As I was their only child, it was all I could do for them. Even though my father's work demanded too much of his time, he still found the time to teach me a man's work. He taught me a lot of things about life and the world outside our own and even of our own world. My father taught me about life. I learned about honor, integrity, loyalty, trust. My dear father, he was always proud of me, always bragging to those near and far of how I would bring honor and glory to the family name. How I would establish my name and self out in the world. How I would earn the respect and recognition of our kind. It broke my heart leaving him and his dreams behind. While my father taught me how to be a man, my mother taught me to be me. She taught me to embrace my person, to understand nothing but my own feelings, ambitions, and dreams. While my father aspired for me to be the son of his wants, my mother inspired me to be my own person. Leaving them behind was about the worst thing I could have ever done. But it was nothing compared to what I had done to him. The one I gave my heart, soul, and body to, the one who will always be in my heart. I never meant to hurt him. I never meant any of the things that happened. I never meant to fall in love with him, but I did. And that is one thing I will never regret. I never anticipated falling in love with this scrawny 14-year-old kid whom everyone pegged as an attention-seeking troll. I didn't want to, at first, fall in love with him, that is. The thought of my parents wanting grandchildren had always been my number one reason of not taking this young man as my own. But as time went on, I saw the true Harry Potter, and it was this Harry that I fell in love with. The kind, big-hearted, loving, trusting, and loyal boy. No, man, that I had fallen for, hook, line, and sinker, as the Muggles would say. I never stood a chance. The short time I had with Harry, I found the true meaning of Gandhi's words. Live as if you were to die tomorrow. Learn as if you were to live forever. Harry Potter, Ronald Weasley, and Hermione Granger, affectionately dubbed as the Golden Trio. I had never believed the rampaging rumors around Hogwarts about these magnificent three. I mean, who would believe that two 11-year-olds took down a fully grown mountain troll to save a girl they barely knew, or save Nicholas Flamel's infamous Sorcerer's Stone from Professor Quirrell, whom I was told had been host to a wispy Dark Lord? Who would have believed that Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger bested Professor Snape and McGonagall's obstacles? Who would have believed that two 12-year-olds found the mythical Chamber of Secrets, and not only did they rescue their friend and sister, but also battled Lockhart and a 50-foot basilisk? Who would have believed that the Golden Trio had once again defied all odds and survived a werewolf on the full moon and went back in time to save Harry's godfather and Hagrid's hippogriff? Who would have believed any of these things? I didn't. But if you ever spend time in the company of the saviors of Hogwarts, you'll find all your doubts melt away with one glance at their haunted eyes and heavy-laden souls. You'll find that what you believed to be legends had been born from facts that three 14-year-olds lived through every single year of their 7 years at what they deemed to be the safest place in the wizarding world. They truly personified the wise saying of Gandhi. But Harry took it to heart. What everyone sees as stardom, Harry sees saving the wizarding world as his duty, his responsibility. While Voldemort used his power for evil, Harry used his to save the same people who ostracized him at every turn. I remember what he said when I brought it up. I watched this movie once. It was about a teenager. He was pretty much a loner. But something happened that granted him powers, and instead of using it to exact revenge on the kind of people who were like the bullies at his school, he used it for the good of the people. His motto was, "With great power comes a great responsibility." I have the power, Cedric, and I want to use it to save the people of this world. What good is having the power when I don't use it to save a life? They can belittle me all they want, but words mean nothing while a life counts for much more than a word of degradation. That was my Harry, always looking beyond the ugly to save the good. As I now looked upon him and his future, I felt a burden lift from my shoulders. My love was finally willing to let himself heal. For too long he had locked himself within, pushing away any who wanted to heal him. For too long he had longed for what has gone, and my heart would break whenever he sheds a tear. For too long he had let himself die, little by little, until there seemed to be nothing but a hollow piece of what used to be Harry Potter was left. And while I was saddened at the deaths of Harry's last link to his parents and godfather, I knew that the presence of Teddy in his life would be his one redemption at attempting to live again. But now, with the entrance of one Edward Cullen, my Harry would finally be able to open his heart again and love with all his heart and soul. He would finally live again. My life changed the day I met Harry Potter, and for all my kicking and screaming, I never will forget the moment I fell in love with him. He often said that I saved him. And even though I seemingly had everything you could ever want, they all meant nothing until Harry, my very own angel, saved me. My life had meaning because he was in it. I was happiest when I was with him. He completed me. While I am heartbroken over the fact of not being able to have a family with Harry and Teddy, I am content to watch over them both live a fulfilling life. He earned it. Courage is resistance to fear, mastery of fear, not absence of fear. Mark Twain. We fought hard that night. We honestly did, but it wasn't enough. Our current residence is testament to that. Even though we are united with our true friends, there is one that we left behind. And for all that I am thankful that he isn't with us, I couldn't help but wonder what life would have been like for him, for all of us, if he hadn't been born in the prophesied month. Would we be freed from looking over our shoulder to see if anyone would snatch my son? Would we be freed from trusting the wrong person? Would we be freed of ourselves? We don't know, and we never will. We were living in the rising of the war. Left and right, we were attacked. No place was safe. No one was trustworthy. Everyone was a suspect, even our own friends. But I shouldn't have doubted one of them. He considered us his pack, his family, and if I had just remembered all that I learned in school and what the prejudices of people taught me, I would have realized that a wolf never hurts his own, and we would have been alive and living with our son. But fate sealed our destiny, however much I despised it. We never truly left our son. Lily had erected a shield of protection around him before she joined me on what that old coot always deemed as our next great adventure. But what strengthened the shield was her love, her sacrifice for her son. That was always Voldemort's downfall, his inability to love. I had rejoiced at the thought that my son had not joined us on our new adventure. But when the years went by and I saw the treatment of my son at the hands of my sister-in-law and her husband, I believe it was the one time I truly felt that my little boy was better off in the afterlife with us than with the living. We could only watch his life unfold, we could only watch the war steadily rising as if it had been waiting for the growth of my son. We could only watch as he lost his godfather, his only chance of getting away from his so-called relatives. We could only watch as he found love and lost it within the same year. We could only watch as he endured pain and criticism at the hands of the people who claims to worship the ground he walks on. We could only watch and pray that Harry would learn to live for himself and not for others. Lily had always prayed for Hermione Granger, Ron Weasley, Albus Dumbledore, Remus Lupin and my school nemesis, Severus Snape, for always being there for Harry, for staying true to him and to themselves. Sure, Ron had a lapse of judgment once, but I could see the loyalty and trust he has for Harry, and that was enough for me. I watch now as he is being held by a man whom I deem worthy of my boy. I am glad that he is starting on the path to healing, as for so long, he had barricaded himself from the kind of love that I have for Lily. My heart had literally broke when Cedric Diggory left him for us. But with Edward Cullen now at his side, I knew that Harry will once again feel. There would be hurdles they will face, but Harry isn't a Potter for nothing. He will prevail. Harry James Potter, my son, may be hailed as a hero, an icon of legend, but to us and to those he hold close to his heart, he will always be just Harry. The sweetest joy, the wildest woe is love. Pearl Bailey. I had fought a Dark Lord once, one who was once my best friend. We had shared the same dreams, goals, for the wizarding world, but when his desires bordered on genocide to create another, I retreated gracefully. He didn't like that. A duel started that ended with the death of my beloved sister and the estrangement of my only brother. My family had been torn asunder because of my foolish ambitions, and that was something that I could never forgive myself for. I had then lived as a mentor and friend to those I taught and those who had accepted me into their lives. I didn't have children. Hogwarts children were mine, and that was more than enough. But when I saw Lily, Remus, and Severus, I knew I found the children of my heart. I never treated them any differently at the beginning, and I didn't neglect all my other children, but there was just something about them that screamed for me to make it better. I had of course known about Remus, lycanthropy, but it wasn't when I actually set eyes on him that I brought him into my heart. His eyes were lifeless and there was an air about him that screamed defeat. I wouldn't have it. The years went by and slowly, my Remus grew to be a fine young man. Brilliant and powerful, he was a wizard to be reckoned with. And there was Lily, my daughter. However much she defied prejudices and cruelty towards Severus Snape, I could see that everything was weighing her down. Not only was she battling wizarding ways, but she was also trying to rectify her relationship with her sister. Like any Gryffindor, however, she fought against them all with bravery and courage, and her greatest weapon, her love. She was a magnificent, brilliant witch of her age. Then there was Severus, my dear Severus. He was the bane of my existence, always defying me, lying to me to protect his no-good father, but I've loved him, the son of my heart. He was different from Remus and Lily, but it also made him unique. He had always tried to resist Lily's affections and Remus' protection, but I knew that he craved them, lived for them. There was a saying that you never experienced hurt until you have children. I never knew it could be true. My heart broke thrice over when Severus joined the Death Eaters, Lily died, and Remus hid from the world. When I saw the dark mark over Godric's Hollow and the bodies of my daughter and James, I knew that I would never again hear her laughter or see her beautiful face. I would have liked nothing better than to break down and cry, but I had a grandson to seek. In all honesty, I never thought he would survive. How could he when his own parents, two fully grown certified wizard and witch, couldn't hold against Tom Riddle. But when I saw his green eyes looking up at me with all the knowledge of a 1-year-old, I knew then that the prophecy would bind my grandson on a path of his own. I knew without a doubt that no matter how hard he tried, he would never be normal. If I had thought carefully that night, I wouldn't have subjected him to the cruelty of his aunt and uncle. I wouldn't have led my only grandchild into the hands of such hateful people. But the damage had been done, and I only realized it 10 years later when he entered Hogwarts. I had made mistakes concerning myself, my family, my students, and my children, and I paid for them dearly. But when I made so many wrongs against Harry, I knew that there is nothing in the world that could ever repay my mistakes. My only grandchild, and I never once took him away. He knew how I felt. He knew so well. How couldn't he when I referred to him as my grandson so many times? I knew he loved me, and he knew why I made the choices I did, and he had always forgiven me. He always did, but I couldn't forgive myself. Harry lost his lover, the boy he confessed he loved with all his heart. A year later and he lost his godfather. Remus was there for him, he always was. As for me, I couldn't bring myself to witness the pain Harry was going through. I just couldn't, and it was this damning decision that broke his trust and faith in me. For 7 years, I had watched him grow into a powerful young wizard that could only be contested by James, Lily, Severus, Remus, and Sirius. I watched him develop into his own person and not that which of his parents. I watched him navigate his way through obstacles with the guidance and company of his two best friends, with his Gryffindor bravery and courage and his mother's greatest weapon, love. I watched him love and lose, and I watched him embrace his sealed destiny. I watched him be risen and lowered by the same people each and every time, and I watched him triumph each and every time. I watched him try to protect me while at the same time, he was trying to forgive me for my sins. I watched him love me, a senile old man, all the way to my death. I now watch as he is being comforted by a man who will glue his heart back together and led him on the path he was always meant to take. I now watch as he is starting to accept a love so like his first but a different world of its own. And as I do, I realized that while the children of Hogwarts and the children of my heart had always made me proud, it was this young man that had given me a reason to fight for what is right. It was this man that had given me a reason to live. Harry James Potter, my grandson, my heart, will always be my memory of eternity. If you hadn't already guessed, this is written from Cedric's, James's, and Albus' point of view, in that order. And if you're wondering just why I deviated from the story, this is part of the story. Maybe you'll find out why, maybe not. I'll have to see if I'm in the mood. Okay, something about a reviewer's review made me contemplate a few things for this chapter. She was talking about Cedric as a ghost, looking over Harry and his choices in life. Then I started writing this, and after Cedric's view, I couldn't stop. So I wrote James's and Albus' views, and this is what resulted from my contemplation. I hope you like this. If you have any questions about why James didn't know about Remus, if you had read carefully in his reflection, you would have found that Lily had never once told James about Remus and Severus. It was because I made it so. It was the time of war and everyone was under suspicion. James and Sirius already disliked Severus, and Remus was already pegged as a follower of Voldemort simply because he's a werewolf, and Lily, knowing full well how the news of her relationship with Severus and Remus would affect her husband and friend, didn't speak up about them both. Speaking up about them would put her brothers in even more danger. She had already talked to Remus about being secret keeper for Godric's Hollow, but the werewolf had refused. Knowing he was already hunted by both the Ministry and the werewolves on Voldemort's side, it was a matter of time before he was caught and be forced to reveal everything. Lily conceded, and she never spoke a word about their conversation to James. Severus had been the one to tell Voldemort about the prophecy, yes, but he didn't know who would be born on the prophesied day. It was on the night of the attack that he found out, and by then, it was too late to save his sister and nephew. He had been estranged from Albus, Lily, and Remus since he made the fateful decision of joining Voldemort, and had never known about their lives. The atmosphere was tense. The lady of the house sat quietly and calmly as if there were no problems in the world and peace was reigning indefinitely without wars and such. She was beeping on a lolly. Her brother sat stiffly next to her, a hand clenching hers as if to assure himself that she was still there. Their nephew was playing quietly in his playpen, occasionally looking up at his family. The cause of the tension, however, sat hunched down in the corner, trying to make himself invisible from the death glares from 6 homicidal vampires. It wasn't like him to cower, but when he had already committed a sin against the family, well, it was better to just hunker down and wait for the storm to calm. "Mrs. Cullen, do you want a lolly?" Luna asked in the silence, garnering stares from her companions. She ignored them, focusing on Esme. "They're quite delicious, I'm told. It's a new batch from Hermione. She said to give you her regards. She was extremely happy with her experiment, you know." "Experiment," Esme said. She didn't squeak at all. "No siree." Luna smiled. "Don't worry, she tested it first. He didn't die, of course. She wouldn't have sent them if he had." Esme sent her husband a bewildered and slightly frightened look. It never was a common look in her family, but with the appearance of the teenagers, she found that fear became a regular occurrence. It wasn't that she was afraid of the teens, it was that she was afraid of what might actually happen should their ways are meant with purpose and intent. She didn't reach for a lollipop, of course, because at just that moment, her first son and his maid walked in. The lady of the Cullen household held her breath. Silly of her, yes, but from the way the lions protected each other, it would be a miracle if any of them leave unscathed. Harry was smiling, a genuine smile, and it was directed at an equally happy Edward. Both stopped short at the living room entrance, taking in the tension in the room. Teddy, who noticed his father's arrival, changed his appearance to that of Harry's, smiling toothily at the young wizard. The young wizard, however, easily took in the pinched look on Draco's face, the shame on Jacob's, and the pure, adulterated hate on the Cullens. He turned to Luna, trusting her to tell him the truth. "Luna, what happened here?" Luna smiled dreamily at him. "Their presence will be honored, their touch loved. Soon the lost will arrive to heal the wound and bridge the hurt. Soon we will live." Draco stared at her wide-eyed as were everyone else. Harry made his way to her side. "Davina." The youngest of the pack turned misty eyes to Harry. "Yes, Phoenix. Come back to me, Davina," Harry softly commanded. "Come on, Luna, show me you." The mist slowly dissipated from the former Ravenclaw's green eyes. She gave him a look of such pure happiness that Harry almost felt certain that the world would fall to tears. She patted him on the cheek. "I'm all right, Phoenix. Everything will be fine now. You'll see, we'll be fine." Harry took her in his arms, wrapping her tight against him. He had no doubt that Luna's words were true. He had felt it too, that feeling of rightness when he finally opened a bit of himself to Edward. He somehow knew that wherever Cedric was, Harry and Edward has his approval. He looked over her head to Draco, who was gazing at Luna with fondness on his features. Whatever he had walked in on, Harry wasn't willing to call on it, content on basking in his sister's serenity for a moment. Silence enveloped the room and its occupants. It was Rosalie who broke the calm. "What just happened?" Rosalie demanded, eyes nearly black with hate and fury. "What magic did you just displayed? Who's coming? Why are they here?" Draco glared at her. "Shut up, Cullen." "Draco!" Harry exclaimed in surprise. Edward in turn went to stand next to his sister. It was clear to both sides that Edward would stand with his family. Harry quickly constructed a wall around his emotions so Jasper couldn't get a read. He glared at the former Slytherin. "What is going on here, dragon?" Draco turned away from him without relinquishing his hold on Luna. "I don't know what you're talking about, Potter." "Draco, I want answers yesterday," Harry glowed with his command. The Cullens unconsciously drew back from the young yet powerful wizard. They had learned this the hard way when Emmett had been enthusiastic in his greeting once. Let's just say that the vampire learned to dodge fast and run harder. Draco trained his gaze on Teddy, deeming it a safe place to look. "After all, it hurts less when you can't see it coming. I had a little misunderstanding with the vampires and it's all resolved now." "Don't worry about it, Potter, it was nothing serious. I have no time for lies, Draco. I want the truth now, your way. You don't have the power against mine, I know," Harry said softly. "The aristocratic Owen whipped his head around, staring wide-eyed at Harry. He knew the threat wasn't empty. A dead Death Eater testified to that. Before he could speak the truth, Jacob spoke up from his corner of the room. It wasn't anyone's fault, Harry, but I admit, the blame lies on me, if only because the Cullens doesn't like me. Jacob ignored the snarls from said family. They took what they saw the wrong way, and one of them decided to avenge their brother. Emmett tried to kill Luna and I took offense, so I almost killed him. That's what happened. Draco took over. Harry and Edward stared at Draco in horror. Edward growled, "That's a lie, Malfoy. Emmett would never do such a thing." Draco stood up in indignation. "Now see here, Cullen, I don't lie, never have, never will, and I take offense to the implication that I would lie about the welfare of my sister. You may be fooled by what we present to your whole of the world, but when it comes to my family, I will kill whoever is foolish enough to think they can damage my family." Draco didn't shout, but the dangerous tone of his low voice proved just a proverbial bullet in a fire as just anything else. "Don't think just because my sisters befriended your family doesn't mean that I will not spare you should any of you hurts them. I killed many to get my way, Edward Cullen, and I will not hesitate to kill your brother if he tries to do what he did today ever again." Draco turned to a grim-faced Harry and said, "I'll be at Neville's." He bent down. At a magically sleeping Luna, courtesy of Harry's work. Without another word, he turned on the spot and disappeared. He left behind a quiet so still a knife wouldn't have done the trick. Harry took a few moments to calm the storm within him but found it couldn't be achieved. Draco may be many things but a liar, he was not. A wave of his hand sent Luna disappearing in thin air. He turned to Jacob. "Take Teddy with you to the reservoir. Keep him safe until I come by." "Harry," Jacob started. "You're on your way now, Jacob," Harry interrupted before the wolf even started beyond the name. Jacob saw what his wolf saw, an alpha rearing for battle. Retreating would be a wise choice, so he scooped up Teddy, grabbed the bag floating in front of him, and left the house, giving the Cullens a wide berth. Harry stared after them, making his way to the window to see them leaving through the forest. He spoke, addressing the window. "We were at the Burrow 2 months before it ended. It was our fault, I accepted that, but it was Molly and Arthur's wedding anniversary and we needed the break. We let our guard down, but to be honest, we didn't think to look at those closest to us." Harry's voice carried a cold, harsh, and bitter tone. He held his wand to Hermione's throat. He couldn't apparate. "My grandfather made sure that there were protections against it on the Weasleys' land. But for those few seconds, I saw another loved one being taken." He turned to the vampires. His eyes were flaming, a sign of his phoenix. "I hated Ron for killing him, but I got my revenge when I met his master one-on-one." Harry smirked, a decidedly evil smirk that shot shivers of dread down Alice's spine. "See, the thing is, my dear Cullens, is that when it comes to our family, there are no boundaries, no holds barred. People learned that lesson early on. For those who dared to defy us, well, do I have to say it?" Harry took in the vampires. They looked frightened and resolved. In Carlisle's case, it occurred to Harry that whatever punishment will be bestowed upon Emmett, Carlisle would accept it as he had accepted that the provocation was entirely Emmett's fault. Harry sighed inwardly. It was hard to find friends these days, and the Cullens were the first ones they made outside of their own circle, but what just happened was inexcusable. "So what? You're going to kill my husband?" Rosalie sneered. "You don't have the guts to do it, Potter. You're all talk but you would never hurt a fly." "Rosalie, shut up," Alice cried. She feared that something big was about to happen, but like always, when it comes to the pack, she could never see it. Rosalie turned on her sister, but before she could say anything, Harry spoke up. "You don't know me at all, Rosalie. My old head of house used to tell us to never assume anything. Nothing good could ever come out of it." "Is that so?" Rosalie was relentless. Harry smiled softly. It didn't reach his eyes. "I could have had you end up in ashes many times, Rosalie, but my sisters likes you, though I don't really know why. I could keep my promise to them to never let any harm come to you, or I could kill both you and your husband now. Trust me, it would save me a headache. Now, tell me why I shouldn't go with the latter." Esme clutched her husband's hand, staring at this stranger in front of her, threatening her children. One look at Emmett and Rosalie showed both vampires ready to take Harry up on his challenge. Jasper was having trouble focusing on the goings-on, concentrating instead on keeping himself locked away from all the harsh emotions rolling over him. Alice would have been crying if her system could produce water. Edward, however, looked at his mate in disbelief and shock. This wasn't the man he was destined to be with. This wasn't the man from months earlier. This was a complete stranger, one Edward could have done without. But he had a feeling that whatever baggages Harry brought with him, the vampire would shoulder some of that baggage also. You haven't answered my question, so I'm going to have to assume you still want to breathe, as it is, Harry said. I thought you never assume, Potter, Rosalie smirked. No, I never said that. You just assumed I do, judging from what I said, Harry smirked in triumph. Now come, I'm tired of this game, he announced suddenly. Give me one reason why I should spare your life, Emmett. The brute of a vampire glared at Harry. You think you can fight me, Potter? I don't know, the man who lived answered. Let's ask my friend, shall we? Harry closed his eyes as he summoned an old friend. As the being appeared next to the wizard, Alice took one look at the stranger and shamelessly hid behind her husband. Rosalie shivered but stood tall next to her husband. Carlyle thought his arm would separate from his shoulders from the tight grip of his wife's. Edward took a defensive stance, ready to fight. Harry smiled at his old friend. The friend in question emanated darkness, yet was an embodiment of living. He was dressed in black, hood up covering his face. No one could see his face. You have summoned. He spoke in a soft voice. It sounded familiar to Edward, but there was a lilt to it that raised his hackles. Harry nodded, as though the figure could see. He was, after all, generally facing Rosalie and Emmett. It seems like the Hales needed a little lesson in what would happen to those who harmed my family, Harry stated. This is the Cullens, as you know. Cullens, this is death. If she could, she would have fainted. As it is, Esme crumbled to the chair she had vacated earlier. The others took a step back as if by distance, death couldn't touch them. I see, Death whispered. Shall I take them both? The green-eyed wizard looked thoughtfully at Rosalie and Emmett. Is it their time? It is if you desire it so. With those words, Death reached upwards, taking off his hood, and revealed a face that was as familiar to Harry as it was to the Cullens. Edward snarled. What trickery is this, Harry? Harry smiled sadly at his mate. No trickery, Edward. This is who I am and who I will always be. I wield death. I am death. I can't change that, Edward. I can't. Harry's gaze flitted from face to face, never settling on one for too long. He found he couldn't look in Edward's eyes, not to mention any of the vampires, for fear of seeing anything other than the familiarity he had gotten used to. He looked to the source of the chilling tension in the room. He had created his doppelganger when he had unknowingly and unwillingly come into his inheritance of Master of Death. He had spent his life killing and losing loved ones to death. He wasn't about to make a profession out of it when the items necessary to become one ended up in his possession. The last straw had been when he had escorted Andromeda Tonks home. His clone was his way out of being death, but he still held the power to wield it, much to his horror. The boy who lived turned his gaze on the Cullens. To his amusement, they looked, well, petrified. He supposed it was expected, especially as he had threatened the existence of Emmett and Rosalie. It was wicked of him to think they deserved it, but the more sensible and sympathetic part of him, influence of Hermione and Luna, won over his justified humor. Would you be more comfortable if Death wasn't here? He asked. Yes, please. Alice's answer was quick and eager. Harry chuckled. He looked to Death. I think you're being wanted to leave, Death, Harry said. I suppose your services aren't needed for today. Sorry for disturbing you. Death shot a last chilling look at the vampires, and then drew up his hood. He addressed Harry. Death is unavoidable, Master Peverell, even for vampires. Tread carefully. They must, or their existence will be nothing more than dust in the wind. Then, he was gone. Esme silently breathed a sigh of relief, still holding tightly to her husband's arm. Alice felt with her mother, but her focus was on her own husband, as she was sure the feeling of fear was abundant and ripe within Jasper. As she started to tend to him, She belatedly realized that Hermione had placed a shield in the form of a bracelet on Jasper to keep out the emotions of others. Remembering this, she gave Harry her attention. Somehow, her prediction just several months ago was quickly proving to be anything but. Rosalie's question tore her from her musings. What kind of trickery was that, Potter? Rosalie was relentless. Harry smiled sadly, making his way back to the window. That was no trickery, Rosalie. And considering the fact that I literally hold your deaths in my hands, I wouldn't be so quick as to challenge me again, Mrs. Hale. I find your attitude trying and childish, and I am very close to my last nerve, which is trembling in anger. Don't try me, Mrs. Hale. Harry's tone was cold and harsh by the end of his short speech. Carlyle placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder, telling her silently to back down. Harry watched with a look of indifference on his face, but the storm in his eyes told of a different story. Edward watched him, suddenly questioning himself as whether he was doing the right thing by finally following what his unbeating heart was telling him to do. In all his years of wandering the earth, he had never before encountered such a situation as the one he had just went through, and he had the feeling it wasn't going to be last time either. Harry waited as the Cullens calmed themselves down. That was something I hadn't planned on telling you, he started. But it is done and over with. Now all you need to do is leave my house. Carlyle frowned, startled at this declaration. Harry, we need to understand what just happened. You can't. Oh, you need, huh? Harry raised an eyebrow. Let me tell you something, Dr. Cullen. You don't need to know anything. You don't have the guts to know anything about us. Look at yourself, Doctor. Look at your family. He waited as Carlyle took a sweeping among his family. Despite the brave facade your daughter is displaying, you are all scared out of your minds. You can't handle what you think you need to know, Doctor. No one can. What can't we know? Jasper's soft voice cut through the tension. Harry looked at him. He and his family knew very well what Jasper had experienced before, during, and after his turning. He was a soldier, just like them. It was perhaps this very reason that Jasper's the only Cullen Draco ever felt comfortable with. Everything, Jasper Whitlock, Harry finally answered. He smirked slightly at the startled looks on the family's faces. Despite the revelations on both sides on their true nature, the Cullens had been extremely hesitant to reveal whatever information they could remember from their past. Your family does not have the stomach for what your father claims, you need to know, but I know that you will be the only one who will truly understand. Jasper's eyes widened as the realization hit him, despite the vague wording. You've seen war. Bit of an understatement but true enough, Harry responded. What kind of war? Jasper asked. Harry paused. He tilted his head, regarding the group before him. It was the kind of war that you've never heard before. It's the kind of war that no one should have ever had to go through. But it was the kind of war we, my family and I, were. What we went through, Dr. Cullen, what we did to go through it, is something that will always be a part of us and for which we suffers every day. You couldn't even begin to understand the kind of pain that we had to bear, but we got through it because there was always someone and something to fight for. Harry gazed calmly at the doctor, who felt anything but calm. You walk and talk as if you know the very way of life, but you forget we can see your past and your future. For many years you tried to forget who you really are by trying to become human by adopting human tendencies. In all your years of hiding, you've never seen life. So really, Dr. Cullen, you don't need to know anything about me because you're still trying to figure out your own children and yourself. Harry saw the uncertainty and fear on Carlyle's face and sighed. Death is one of the reasons of who I am, and since you and your family are scared of him out of your minds, you can then never handle the truth. He took in the various expressions on the faces of those before him. The foremost and often displayed expression was fear, something he had never wanted to see on their faces concerning his family. He sighed, resigned. Dr. Cullen, please take your family and leave. I don't like any of you very much at the moment, so please, go away. And Emmett Hale, I usually am not a very nice man when someone lays a hand on my family, but I'm going to give you and your wife a second chance. Use it wisely. Harry turned his back on them, facing the fireplace as he listened to the sounds of the family leaving until there was only one person in the room with him. There was no doubt as to who it was. What do you want, Edward? I was falling asleep as I wrote the last page, so forgive me for any wrong in this story. I just want to crawl into my bed and sleep till tomorrow. Forgive me for the dull chapter, but it was all I could work with. I appreciate honesty. Oh yeah, I really need a beta. I believe I made many grammatical mistakes throughout the story. Thank you. It's been a couple of weeks since the unfortunate incident that took place in the lion's den. A couple of weeks that neither the pack nor the Cullens were seen in school. A couple of weeks since the pack had let Emmett and Rosalie take a short vacation in Alaska. It was also worth a couple weeks of deep contemplation on Edward's part. He now sat at his piano, his fingers dancing lightly on the black and white keys as he thought back to the conversation he had with Harry after the wizard had basically told the vampires to get the hell out of my sight. The wizard was an enigma that Edward couldn't deny had thrilled him to no end. He had given up completely after Bella, but that all changed once Alice started having fuzzy and often blacked out visions of Harry Potter. As soon as he saw him crossing the school parking lot, Edward knew instantly that his search was over. Completely ignoring Emmett's mutters of, "Here we go again," the older vampire had set out to claim Harry for his own despite Draco's contempt. He still didn't know anything of Harry, but he had hoped with time, that he most certainly did not want, he would, but what had happened a few weeks ago, and afterwards, still shook him to the depths of his frozen heart. Flashback. What do you want, Edward? Harry asked without turning around. Edward inwardly winced at the harsh tone. He had never been confronted with an angry Harry, and now he was starting to believe Ron's claims of a scary Harry when mad. I need answers, Harry, Edward answered. I need answers, and I'm tired of all this secrecy about your pasts. And now you show us that. What aren't you telling us, Harry? Harry shook his head, still keeping his back to Edward. You wouldn't understand, and I don't make a habit of blurting out my life secrets to anyone who wants in my pants, Edward. Damn it, Potter, Edward snarled. I'm not asking for an entire novel here. It just would have been nice to know a few things about you, like the fact that you're deaf in your spare time. How's that working out for you, by the way? Harry finally turned around. There was a smirk playing lightly around his mouth, but the look in his eyes was far from amusement. It's working out great, thanks for asking. Hell's hell on the features, but you know, I'm still pretty, as Luna always tells Death. How about you? Edward glared heatedly at the mock-innocent look on the wizard's face. When a few moments of silence passed without any more input from Harry, the vampire shook his head and said, You know what, never mind. If you don't want to tell me, fine, but understand something, Harry, you are my mate, and somehow, some way, I will find a way into that mind of yours, and everything you've kept hidden from me will be revealed. I just want to hear the truth from your own lips with your own voice. And I can't be there for you if you don't try and let me in. Don't be such a drama queen, Edward, Harry snapped. I'm starting to think that all that sparkling has damaged your manhood. I know damn well you're my mate, but I also know that my family comes first. We are here to heal, Edward, not to pick fights, and that is exactly what it'll come to if your family doesn't back off. I have no regrets killing those who offend me. Don't think your family will get off scot-free. I'm not done with any of you yet. Edward literally took a step back at the fury radiating from the wizard. He knew well what lengths Harry would go to, and that scared the hell out of him. Hearing the fact that he will always come second in Harry's life hurts, but it would also be the pot calling the kettle black, so he let that thought go. He shook his head. He didn't want to fight with Harry again. He said, I apologize. I wish I could promise that Emmett and Rosalie won't try that again. It's not your apology that I need, Harry interrupted. I want Emmett and Rosalie to apologize to my sister in person and with sincerity. Anything less and I will not be responsible for my siblings' actions. Keep this in mind, Edward, and tell your family that the only thing that will stand between your deaths and my siblings is me. I may be dangerous, but the others can be viciously vindictive. Edward nodded, resolved and resigned. He had first-hand experience just how cruel the lions could be. Draco had sent them clothes reeked of werewolf smell just because. They had to relinquish their home to confused strangers to clean their home. Hermione had once sent a potion to Rosalie, saying it would enhance her beauty. Rosalie, being of vanity that she is, had drunk it. The only thing it had accomplished was giving her boils for a week. It was revenge for calling Neville a clumsy, idiotic fool. Unfortunately for Rosalie, Hermione had taken offense to that and exacted her revenge on the vampire's pride. Ginny had gifted them with a baby dragon for the insult. Edward finally said, "Will I see you again?" Harry shook his head. "We're leaving for England. Right now. I need my mother and the others need to see Luna to comfort themselves. We'll be back when I feel better about all of you. But like I said, I'm not done with any of you yet." End flashback. Edward had related the conversation to his family, garnering various reactions of horror and resignation. Following the threat to them both, Rosalie and Emmett had packed for Alaska, leaving only an unknown date as to when they would return. Edward had spent the time contemplating what his life had come to. Centuries of living had never prepared him for the lions, something that he was coming to regret, as lessons beforehand would have been beneficial to dealing with the family of wizards. But despite the amount of emotional trauma his mother was experiencing due to the lions, Edward couldn't have been more content with the knowledge that his mate was finally here, even if that mate was death. That would require some getting used to. He may not know more about Harry than he would like, but he was certain of one thing: he would never leave the wizard for all the gold in the world. Harry was his and he was Harry's. As he started on another piece of box, he heard his family's exclamations of surprise. Curious, he made his way downstairs only to be assaulted of the distinguished smell of the only wizards they know. He hurriedly made his way down to find his family with Harry and his family. "Harry?" he asked, confused and curious. "Hello, Edward," Harry answered, a small smile on his face. Luna, Hermione, Draco, and Ron stood behind him. They were looking around at the vampires, but it was with looks of tight unease and anger. Luna just smiled beatifically at them. Alice broke the uncomfortable silence. She moved forward, saying, "It's good to see you guys. I missed you." And wasn't that the truth? Sometimes, Edward could hear her asking Jasper if it was wrong to miss the wizards more than she missed her own siblings. Luna took a step forward to meet Alice, only to be held back by Draco. Alice stopped, a hurt look on her face. Carlisle broke in, "Why don't we go into the living room?" The party moved in. A few minutes was spent in silence as the group settled into chairs and sofas. "Where's Neville and Ginny?" Esme politely asked. "They're busy," Ron answered shortly. He grunted when Hermione elbowed him, but she didn't provide an answer herself. Harry finally said, "Luna felt that we should all sit down and talk. Draco felt we should obliterate you all into dust. Personally, I felt more inclined towards Draco's suggestion, but that's just me. So, as we are here instead, I'll have to forego my desire to kill you all." Ron snorted in contempt at the uneasy look on the Cullens' faces. "So, the Hales aren't back yet? Why do you assume they're not here?" Jasper asked. "Please, we're not stupid, you know," Ron scoffed. "We paid them a little visit a few days ago. If I knew you could, Emmett would have pissed his pants when we showed up in their room. And really, for vampires, I got to say, you're all like kittens. At least Arrow and the others put up more of a fight." "Ronald," Luna and Hermione scolded. Ron paid them no mind as he and Draco went over the details of their meeting, much to the horror of the Cullens. Harry said nothing throughout it all, intent as he is on Edward. He had missed the vampire more than he had thought he should. Losing so many loved ones in the war had hardened his heart against love, and to find that another one holds the key to unlocking his walls had made him more than a little scared. But regardless of how he felt about opening up again, he knew that Edward was his key to live again, to be able to love again. The incident with Luna was just another reason why he shouldn't, but like many other instances in his life, he didn't have a choice with sisters like Luna and Hermione. Ginny was of the opinion of blowing up the Cullens, and then register himself in a monastery. That way, we wouldn't be faced with your sullen and moping self around the house whenever you have boy troubles, Ginny had advised Harry. He threw a shoe at her. Now they're back in Forks. He knew that the only way to resolve their problems was to talk and maybe come to some form of truce, but he had been raised in a war, and sometimes, the best problems are no problems at all, and that can only be accomplished by eliminating it permanently. Unfortunately, Molly, Luna, and Hermione weren't very much accepting of that plan. Spoilsports, the lot of them, he thought. He tuned back into the squabbling. Well, he amended at the look of terror on the vampires' faces, at least they're afraid of us. Small comfort, but it'll do. Enough, he said quietly. Ron and Draco ended their tale immediately. It was a tone they had learned over the years that meant Harry was no longer their brother, he was their commander, and it would do them well to listen and listen well. Harry looked at the Cullens. We will wait for the others. Carlisle exchanged a look with Esme. What? Others? Ginny and Neville are bringing your children, Dr. Cullen, Harry explained. Just as Harry finished, there was a crack outside and then Ginny's voice. Merlin's sake. Ron was right. These vampires bring shame to the vampire race. How they call themselves that without being ashamed is beyond me. Sparkling, drinking animal blood, not that I condone killing people, but come on. They are not vampires, Nev. Ginny, it's their way of life. We shouldn't begrudge them in how they live, came Neville's soothing voice. Yeah, well, they're still not vampires, I tell you. Vampires do not sparkle. At least Jane is scary as hell. These people just make me want to gag. Ginny and Neville came into the room still talking while Emmett and Rosalie walked behind with a sick look on their faces. Rosie, Emmett, what's wrong? Esme got up in a hurry, worry clearly on her features. Nothing, Esme, it's just, their way of transportation makes my stomach turn, Emmett answered. Hermione turned to Ginny and Neville. Were there any problems? Ginny snorted. Are you kidding? They folded as soon as they saw Nev's sword. It was easy as pie, as these muggles always say. Ginny, Neville warned. Oh, all right, I might have threatened I would make a fire out of them as Alaska was way too cold. That Kate girl, she tried to electrocute me, but well, I maybe kind of turned it back on her, Ginny explained, smiling sheepishly at the dangerous look on Hermione's face. Before Hermione could say anything, Luna put a hand on her arm. They are here, my own. That is all that matters. Hermione placated. They turned to Harry. The young father looked back at them. At Luna's nod, he glanced at the vampire family. They were all looking back curiously. You wanted to know who we are. I was told it would be best to reveal a little of ourselves before time, Harry began. We fought in a war, he said. It was hard to trust anyone, but we had each other. We were always at the front of each battles. We fought, hoping and praying that we would all come out of each one alive. We lost so many. Friends, family, enemies, allies, we lost so many. Harry glanced at his family. We almost lost Hermione not once but twice, I told you that. Luna was also taken. Neville was tortured every day while at school. Draco witnessed his parents' death when they refused to have him commit to the man who killed our people. Neville lost his parents the same year my parents died. Their bodies still lived, but their minds, they tortured them so much that they were never the same. He and Ginny were beaten every day for daring to stand up to the forces of evil. Ron killed so many protecting us all. He saw his brother fall in the final battle. The beginning of the end. That's what they called it. Harry didn't register the shocked gasps from the vampires. He was lost in the past. I was the end for the war. I started it and I had to finish it. This man, Tom Riddle, fashioned himself as a Dark Lord, intent on destroying one and all so he could rule the entirety of the world. My parents and so many others fought him at every turn. Then my mother got pregnant. That's when our paths crossed, Harry intoned. There was a prophecy. One will be born at the end of the 7th month. Neville and I fit the prophecy, but until we were born, no one knows who exactly will carry it out. When Nev came out early, I became the prophecy. There was more to the prophecy, though. One cannot live while the other survives. He killed my parents on October 31st. I was one. I could still hear my mother screaming to let me live, to kill her instead. He killed her in the end. He tried to kill me too, but he couldn't. I had to die, you see, so he could be the only one to live. The spell rebounded on him, but instead of dying, he became nothing more than a shadow, living in one body and the next so he could survive. Anyway, I killed a man when I was 11. That's when the war started. We were just too young at the time to truly understand what we were doing. But in our 4th year, that's when we learned. That's when we truly fought back, Harry told, quietly and harsh. He looked up at the Cullens. They were silent in their grief for the young family in front of them. Edward could do nothing but stare in cold horror at Harry. Out of everything he had learned so far of the wizards, this had never occurred to him. Harry continued, I was one when I lost my parents. I lost my lover when I was 14. I was 15 when my godfather died. At 16, I lost my grandfather. I lost my godfather and brother when I was 17. I lost so many friends and family, dying to protect me, to make sure I live. And I did. And I killed Tom Riddle and avenged so many deaths. But none of that could bring my family back. Killing Riddle didn't lessen the hurt any more than if I had killed myself instead. Harry smiled sadly. I don't think I would be here if it hadn't been for my family and death. I wanted to die so many times, but just because I was hurt didn't mean that my death wouldn't hurt my family. So I'm here with them. It still hurts, we are all still hurt, we all still have nightmares, but the fact that we are still alive and living showed that even if Riddle had decimated family and friends of a lot of our people, we are still strong. Harry trailed off, leaving silence. He didn't look at anyone, still lost in his past. Esme yearned with the desire to just take them all in her embrace and never letting go. Alice wanted to lock them in a room and never letting them out to the evils of the world. Carlisle finally understood what Harry had meant that they would never understand. He doesn't. Not at the depths that these young people doesn't went through. He doesn't think he ever will. Luna took up where Harry left off. That's why we are here. We chose this place for its solitude and because it's out of the way. We wanted to go somewhere to heal. We couldn't do that at home. There are still ghosts haunting us. This way, so far from home, it might help us in letting go. How long ago was this war? Jasper asked softly. 10 years, Neville answered. The look on their faces was priceless, but Ron held in his laughter. It wasn't the time. But that's impossible. Emmett exclaimed. You're only, what, 17 or 18? It can't be. I'm afraid it can be, Emmett, and it is, Hermione said. But that would make you 27 years old, and you don't look that old unless you're vampires, which is impossible because we would know, Alice rambled off. I'm 26 years old, actually, Luna piped up cheerfully. I'm the baby in the family. Harry, Edward inquired. What are they talking about? You are 17 years old, right? Harry looked up. No, Edward, I'm not 17 years old. In reality, I'm 27 years of age. We all are except Ron. He's 28. How can that be? Carlisle asked. We're immortal. Draco shrugged carelessly. Draco's announcement settled heavily within the two families. There was not a sound made, and Ron quickly tired of the monotony of the atmosphere. He leaned a little closer to Hermione and whispered in her ear, How long is this going to take? Because I'm hungry and I promised Shacklebolt I'll finish the paperwork by tonight. Hermione elbowed him in the ribs as Rosalie glared at him. The vampire practically spewed venom as she snarled. I don't know who you think you are, but you are not being remotely funny. Just because you are magical doesn't give you the right to be so flippant about everything. Ron rolled his eyes. Really, Rosalie, you are the most hilarious thing I've ever encountered since that idiot Lockhart. You two are about on the same level, I should say. Ron, Hermione scolded. Now is not the time. Carlisle looked up, anxious to get back to the matter at hand. I'm sorry, but finding you are immortals is a bit far-fetched. Like apparently vampires are real. Neville raised an eyebrow in question. And yet, here you are. That is a vastly different comparison, Carlisle argued. We can die, whereas immortals, as I have read, lives forever. Draco scoffed in irritation. Yes, immortals lives forever, but who wants to do that? Who wants to live in a world where good and evil are constantly fighting with no thought whatsoever of others? Who does? What do you mean? Alice asked in a quiet voice. It is not as grand as people makes immortality out to be, Luna said softly. Being immortal is very painful and full of hurt, but we wouldn't want it any other way. It was the only way. The only way for what? Esme asked. The only way to be with me, Harry answered, tearing his gaze from those of Edward's. A confused look crossed the vampires' faces. Harry sighed. It would have been better to not reveal who they are, but he had never been able to refuse Luna anything. I am death, master of death, and all that nonsense, Harry explained. In addition to that vicarious position which enables my ability to live forever as it is, I also have basilisk venom and phoenix tears in me. I'm not going to go through that with you because I am just a little bit tired of explaining myself to those who I felt doesn't exactly deserve my time nor the knowledge of our nature. Maybe someday I'll feel just a little bit better about you, but as of now, you are really at the top of my most bloody hated people list, and really, congratulations on passing Voldemort and Fudge. I didn't think anyone could surpass those two in being my enemy. Ron was cackling into a pillow while Draco smirked evilly at the vampires. Ginny, Neville, and Luna grinned widely. Hermione just sighed and wondered just what she did to deserve such friends with smart mouths. Then she remembered all they had been through and she amended that thought. Well, she thought, maybe I did something good to be rewarded with them. She glanced at the family they had come to tentatively call friends and wondered why they could not find friends who would not end up trying to make their lives complicated. Finding true friends, real friends, was hard, especially considering who and what they are. That didn't mean they didn't give up hope of finding such friends. And whether the others liked it or not, the Cullens had become that kind of friend. But maybe Luna had been right. It would be a while before both families would truly appreciate each other for they who are. Much like Harry earlier, her simple enough had done the trick of bringing her family down. She gave them a look for extra measure. You have to understand this isn't fun, nor is it simple for us, Dr. and Mrs. Cullen, Hermione implored. You are already on fragile ground as it is. To be honest, I agreed with my family on never letting you know of our immortality. But given the fact that my brother is your son's mate and Luna is our seer, we really had no choice, but that also doesn't mean we have to give you every detail. You will have to make do with what little we tell you. Like Harry said, until you have returned to our good graces, you will never know anything beyond the simple and necessary explanations. Do you understand? Yes, Hermione, Esme quickly answered, not wanting to further alienate these young people she had to come to accept as friends. We understand. Good, Hermione said shortly. As for the rest of us, Luna spoke, turning eyes her way. We had come across a book of Harry's ancestor talking about the possibility of immortality. Combined with Hermione's knowledge, Draco's resources, and Ron, Ginny, and Neville's heritage, we succeeded in turning ourselves to ageless young adults. I must admit, I was a bit easier to work as I already had Harry's blood coursing through my veins when he adopted me as his sister. How did his blood interact with yours just by adoption? Jasper asked. Neville said, in our world, there are two kinds of adoption, the Muggle one and then there's the blood adoption. The parties involved will undergo potions and rituals for the adoption to be completed. When this happens, the one being adopted will, in addition to their own blood and genes, will gain whoever's bringing them into their house. Harry and Luna did the same for each other as brother and sister, just like Harry did for Teddy. Speaking of Teddy, Carlisle said, apprehensive and confused. You said the war ended 10 years ago, correct? A nod from Neville was his answer. Harry also said that his second godfather, Teddy's biological father, died when he was 17. How is Teddy still a baby when his real father died 10 years ago? A grudging look of respect crossed Ron's and Draco's faces when the vampire caught the crux of the matter that stumped most. Ginny smirked. It would have been difficult to explain why a 17-year-old has a 10-year-old son now, would it? The dropped jaws were the reactions to her answer. She giggled in delight at how they continually surprised the vampires. It was a pity, however, they couldn't die of heart attacks. Ginny, that is enough, Luna said. She had a slight frown on her fey-like face. You are being mean. Stop it. The redhead stopped laughing, sending Luna a sheepish look. Sorry. Luna nodded, appeased. We must not make light of the situation. They will arrive soon. The Weasley daughter nodded silently. Alice, much like her family, was sitting in complete confusion. Draco just sighed and snapped, are we done here yet? That joke of a wolf has caught our scent and I want to be long gone from here before he finds us. Honestly, Dragon, I don't know why you keep skirting him. You know as well as any of us that it is inevitable. Seriously, I think moving here made all your brains addled, Ron snapped back, irritated. He stood up, glaring at Harry and Draco. I'm leaving, but I will be back in 2 days. I want this mess settled by then. So help me, Draco, if you don't just accept this and move on, I will banish you to Azkaban, and don't think I won't. You're giving me a headache with all your whining. And Harry, I don't care if you don't tell all of the vampires, but you and your boyfriend needs to get your affairs in order. Ginny, get your ass back to Egypt immediately. I'm not liking your childish attitude any more than I like your current boyfriend. Luna and Hermione have more pressing things on their minds to be saddled with your attitude as well. He glared at the vampires, watching with awe and surprise on their features. I'm warning you, Cullens, if anything like what happened to Luna ever happens again, I'll show you the reason why I am worse than Harry when it comes to vengeance. I don't like my family in danger, and you are the danger. Rosalie and Emmett, I'll skewer you myself if you ever disrespect my sister in any way again. She's worth more than you two will ever be. Don't make me regret my decision to let you live. The lions sat straight in their respective seats, recognizing the commanding and harsh behavior of their brother. There are only 2 instances where Ron takes hold of his commanding and harsh nature. When he's commanding an army of wizards against the dark forces, he was the reason for many of their battles won in the war, and when he's furious. Even Harry daren't go against him when Ron was in his dark zone. Ron turned to Neville and Hermione, both of whom were looking at him with small smiles of respect. You coming with me, or are you planning to spend the night? Neville stood, shaking his head. I'm coming with you. I have papers to grade and lessons to plan. Minerva was kind enough to grant us the last few days off, but I don't want to push my boundaries. She's been through enough. Hermione nodded but said to Ron, I'll be home by tonight. Don't wait up. Ron keyed her on the cheek in acquiescence. I'll see you tonight then. Harry, don't dawdle. He turned to Luna, dotting her on the forehead. I'll tell Mum to send up Teddy. I'll see you all in 2 days. Draco, behave. With that, he followed Neville and a red-faced Ginny out the house. Silence followed their exit. That was. Alice trailed off, not sure whether to be horrified or extremely amused. Having never confronted a pissed-off Ron before, Alice was surprisingly calm after facing a furious Ron. A few minutes passed in blessed silence before Edward said, You don't have to tell us everything, Harry. What you have told us already is more than enough. I don't want to put you through a trying time again. Esme, sending her son a grateful smile, agreed. We don't want to push you more than you allowed us to. We are sorry for what happened with Luna, and I assure you, I'll make sure it does not happen again. Harry, Draco, Hermione, and Luna exchanged looks. Luna nodded. Harry sighed. He said, Thank you for the apology, Mrs. Cullen. Despite the fact that I wanted it to come from the Hales themselves, it seems Luna is okay with it coming from you. It will not happen again. The last sentence was stated flatly and matter of fact, as if it was a vow. Then Harry said, standing up, his siblings following him, If you want to meet my son in his true form, I invite you to dinner in our home in 2 days. We will explain him then. There was a flurry of action when the vampire family realized that the wizardry family was taking their leave. There were farewells, but it was quieted when they realized Harry and Edward weren't among them. The 2 men in question had disappeared into the hall when Harry came up to Edward wanting to talk. A silencing charm went up around them when they escaped into the hallway. They both stood, looking at one another silently. It was a long time before Harry spoke. In the last couple of weeks, I've tried to tell myself that I don't like you, he said, ignoring Edward's wince. I've tried to convince myself that I don't need you in my life. Merlin knows I have enough complications in my life. I've tried so hard and so long to convince myself, but I just couldn't escape the truth. He looked straight into Hazel's eyes. I need you, not to mention I want you in my life. I don't know why, but apparently I do. And I realize that we still don't know each other as well we should, and I know that's partly my fault, but I will do better. I came to accept the fact that we will be together, but you should know that I won't change for anyone, not even for you, so you'll have to accept me as a whole. And if you accept me, you will also have to accept my family. I go where they go, they are mine as I am theirs. Don't come between that and I won't come between you and yours. Harry took a deep breath, realizing he was rambling. He took one more breath before taking hold of the stunned handsome face before him once more. Edward, will you go out on date with me? To be continued. I hope you enjoyed this story. Also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.